You're listening to episode 193 of the Amazing Comics Pals.
Woo!
We're a group of comic book journalists and friends who record a podcast together because we don't talk enough about comics in our daily lives.
Well, it's with a heavy heart that I'm here to announce that the Comics Pals are going to have to cancel the final leg of the Summer Jamboree tour.
No.
Yeah, it really sucks because we had already printed out 500,000 copies of the 4th of July Marco swimsuit calendar, and we wanted to give them to all of you.
What a waste.
I know. He's dressed up like Uncle Sam for July. That one's really good. He waxes Bikini Zone.
I was a snow bunny for December, looking forward to the seasons, of course.
What you guys can look forward to though is in a couple weeks we're going to do the event anyway inside, no crowd though, and we're just gonna shoot it real cinematically. We'll fight on top of a roof. It'll be great.
Tastefully.
That was a wrestling joke.
I got
I tried, guys.
Palsamania.
Oh, did that get canceled too?
Well, we're fingers crossed.
We're reworking it. It'll be okay.
I hope we can give these 500,000 calendars to charity if they'll take them. I'm just picturing kind of, remote communities around the planet with calendars and Marco in their wall. It might be okay.
You know how you'll see people in different countries or from different countries, and they'll just have a shirt that it's like an American shirt, but it's kind of out of place.
Yeah,
it'll say the 98 Utah Jazz NBA champions, even though they lost the Bulls.
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Stuff like
that. Carl Malone, the mailman, he delivered that to that country.
So it's like you imagine all these calendars of Marco are all around the world, and he becomes an international figure, but no one knows what the Comics Pals is at all. It's just he becomes so recognizable.
He's like a mysterious model. They're like, who is this Marco?
I could really see that genuinely happening with Marco.
Bro, they're gonna be in love with the fall edition. Me jumping around with leaves, that'll be the one. They'll be like, oh, that's that guy.
See, I was thinking we go for maybe that's the first one of fall. Maybe for November, we go for a lumberjack look. You're shirtless, but you got the real thick boots. And you're just chopping down a fucking tree, glistening in sweat. I don't know, man. I feel like it'll work.
I'm about it with the the overall straps, just kind of one hanging down. I'm
all right.
I'm envisioning it.
You got the axe kind of nestled between your butt cheeks. Just
Phil, you always take it too far. You always take it too far, Phil.
Officially, we're done with that now.
No, it's not far enough.
If you want the calendar, write to us at thecomicspals@gmail.com.
Oh God.
And Phil will send it to you. Phil will send it to you.
Bro, I've been known to commit.
That's true. Speaking of commitment, actually, before we speak about commitment, I do want to let you guys know where else you can get us. We're on social media at the Comics Pals. And if you're watching this on YouTube, we appreciate you. And you can leave us a like, drop us a comment, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel so that you can enjoy more content like this. And hit the notification bell so you... What?
Say commit to us.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's all about commitment at the end of the day. So commit to us by subscribing to our channel and subscribing to us on podcast hosting platforms. That's the kind of commitment I want to see. Join our Discord. Come hang out with us. We've got lots of fun stuff going on over there all the time. Can't really think of a specific conversation we had this week over there, but
actually, America, all America comics. We've been talking about how apparently Joe Casey was the original.
My dad?
Yeah. So Phil's dad was the original creator of America Chavez, and was so frustrated with the direction that Marvel has taken the character, decided to make his own America Vasquez in Image Comics and write that comic.
Dude, I love when like creators are low-key that kind of petty where they're like, you know what, I'm gonna take my idea that I started at Marvel or DC and just take it to Image, finish it there so I don't get sued. I'll change it up a little bit. That's always good.
I mean,
That's what Walt Simonson did.
Right.
Sure.
With Thor.
And that's like
It's pretty good too.
That's like the whole story of how Image basically started. It's like, well, fine, we're gonna go start our own thing. It's like, look at like Youngblood. Like half the Youngblood characters were characters that were going to appear. Like Prophet, which we did a book club on, was going to be an X-Man character.
Wow.
Here's you like Spider-Man? Well, here's Spider-Person.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, whatever. They got like 6 belts and a bunch of pouches on their pants. You'll like them. It's fine.
So let's get back to talking about commitment. Oh yeah, the Kill or Be Killed book club, by the way, out right now. Really great. Woo! Go give that a listen. I think collectively we are really proud of it.
Oh yeah.
So speaking of commitment, Marco lost a bet. For those of you who have been following the storyline, of course, you know that Marco challenged me to Smash Brothers, and we had our battle. We had our big battle over at Twitch TV/Comics Pals, and I beat him. It was 5-2.
Really?
In a first to 5 series. Yeah, I know it's incredible. I really had to persevere. There were times I wasn't sure I was going to make it, but I came around. So
we're proud of you, bud.
Thanks, dude. I appreciate that, man. So the bet was that if Marco lost, he would have to read physically an event comic of my choosing. Now, of course, I'm not going to choose something great. I'm not going to say, hey, read Kingdom Come. Go have the time of your life. No, go read something horrible. So over at the Comics Pals Discord, we put our heads together and we came up with the greatest bad event we could think of at the time, which was recommended by Sultan of Swing. That, of course, is the Onslaught event at Marvel Comics. And Marco has had to go to some great lengths to pick up this entire event, haven't you?
I have. Apparently, Marvel no longer prints a number of these books.
I wonder why.
I tried to get them as the. I also wonder why. I mean, it's supposed to be of such great quality. It's odd that they wouldn't, want to capitalize on it. But they only have 4 large paperbacks for it. The complete epic of Onslaught is broken out into 4 trades. I could find one for a reasonable price, and apparently a reasonable price for any one of these trades is less than $75. Because the next volume 2 started at 72 or 75, then like volume 3 at 90 something. And if you go over, I think it was last episode, but we were poking around Amazon and we found that volume 4 used with some writing inside of it came out to, I think, about $300.
Yeah, it was like $200 or $300. It was not cheap.
So I had to find alternatives, and I settled for having to get each issue individually of the entire event and purchasing it that way. A total of 1 trade and about 33 issues.
Oh my god!
So, Marco, let me do a gut check with you here. How are you feeling about all this?
Oh, I'm pumped. I can't wait to read floppies, get to see the back matter, look at what kind of odd ads that they had, and then obviously read the event. But
what year did this come out?
96, 97?
Yeah.
Oh, dude. Oh. Marco,
I want you to be an expert on this topic when we come back. Like, I want you to be like an encyclopedia on this when we get back. Like, oh yeah, I remember reading the impetus behind issue 4. You see, was that's what I want.
I'm gonna have all of it listed out in a book report that I'm gonna be presenting to the rest of the pals. We'll be able to dissect it a little bit.
Beautiful.
And
can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pumped.
I can't wait.
I am very excited for the Reverse Book Club. I can't wait.
Reverse Book Club.
Yep. And we're gonna do it. We're gonna have you presenting regularly and let us know your progress and things like that. It's gonna be awesome.
I can't get over the poetry here. Like the real Onslaught was Sean ripping out your spine and Smash, and now you got to read Onslaught. It's just beautiful.
It's like cruel poetry.
There may be people who say or feel that this is cruel or this is wrong or whatever, and to that I say, yeah, you're right. That was the point. That's what Marco agreed to. So let's not cry now. This is what it is, Yeah. And to Marco's credit, I will say, he's taking it like a champ. He's saying, okay, saddle up. I got to read this shit. Let's do it.
Marco's a masochist, bro. That's the thing. Is that he wants it. He wants to suffer.
Sean, I'm glad you mentioned human rights groups have reached out to us saying what you're doing is a war crime.
Damn right.
I'm gonna poison that motherfucker's water supply.
There's no quarter. Why would I relent? We're at war. This is what it is. This is what happens.
Let's not forget, Marco was the one who cast the first stone.
Right. I don't start it, but I end it. That's what my mom taught me.
I never start shit, but always end shit.
So I did want to say happy 4th of July. For us, it is currently the 4th of July. We're recording this on a holiday, so be grateful. I want to say happy birthday, of course. Got to put the shout out to America.
not to Kale? Okay.
Oh, he's as old as America.
I was gonna keep it going. I wanted to see who else we could say happy birthday to. Captain America, maybe it's Superman's birthday. I don't know. But yes, happy birthday, America Chavez, of course.
Of course.
Yeah. No, happy birthday, Kale. That's why he's not here today. He's celebrating his birthday, although I'm not sure what kind of celebration he can do right now, given that where's he at?
400 years old, too.
He's in Luxembourg.
Right. I don't know how they celebrate birthdays in Luxembourg, but
I think at the old folks' home they give him a cake.
Nice.
Yeah, I think they give him a cake at the old folks' home. I don't think it has any frosting on it, but
his heart can't take it.
That counts.
I'm gonna leave that alone. I'm gonna just end it. It's his birthday. That's fine.
My man doesn't get a happy ending. It's okay.
Damn.
Nice. Oh, is Jess also there?
No. She's living on her own in like a Golden Girls scenario, and she goes and visits Kale, a couple times a week. It used to be every day, but it just got to be a little bit much.
Damn. Had to scale that back.
Grandpa's really depressing.
It's like he was already a sad sack before he was in the home, but now, I don't know.
So I wanted to let you guys know that just a little note that I think you might like. Netflix now has what some people say is the best Batman movie on it, and that is Batman: Mask of the Phantasm.
Oh, true.
Really?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Why the fuck did that get added to Netflix of all places?
It's a Fox property.
Oh.
That makes even less sense.
It was because Batman the animated series was on Fox Kids and its run, and then it was when they made the movie, it was distributed by Fox Studios.
Huh. Okay. That's just weird. It's super weird that it's a DC property that's owned by Warner. It's not on Warner or DC's app, but it's because it's owned by Fox, which is now owned by Disney, so they'll sell it to Netflix. Okay.
It's just, that's a really good way of putting it, Pete.
It's fucking weird because we live in a weird, all media's cut up in gang territories, I guess now, but whatever.
Especially back then.
Yeah, there are several stories like that of weird rights issues. You look at the history of Spider-Man on TV.
Oh my god!
And it's so crazy. The reasons why some of those shows have been canceled. Like, oh, we don't have the rights anymore. Like once stuff got weird with Marvel and them being bought by Disney and Sony, it's just crazy.
Yeah, there was that.
It makes you think of the Netflix thing. With the Netflix shows, I mean.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Same kind of thing, right? Yeah, where like the the deal was altered, so now they like live in this weird limbo, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it reminds me of specifically Spectacular Spider-Man and Earth's Mightiest
Yep.
Heroes. Those shows both whipped, and they both got canceled because of the Disney acquisition. Because it was like I think Sony produced the Spectacular Spider-Man show.
Earth's Mightiest Heroes was actually on Disney. That
was like
where it
Disney
aired.
XD, right? Something
Right,
like that.
and they canceled it because they wanted to make a different Avengers show that was more kind of in line with the theatrical versions.
And that show sucked.
That's my understanding. I never actually watched it.
I saw the pilot of it at a Comic-Con panel and was like, no.
Sean, did you ever go back and watch Earth's Mightiest Heroes?
No, I haven't.
You
I haven't
should.
actually opened Disney Plus since I finished watching the X-Men animated series.
Okay.
You'd really like it.
It's very good.
I've seen like a handful of episodes in the past while it was airing, and it seemed pretty good. I've never sat down and like dug in, so maybe that's a project I can take on. I've been wanting an animated show to watch. I've actually been I've been waiting for Yu-Gi-Oh to get on.
Yes!
Hell yeah.
We
Nice.
just activated your trap
Oh
card.
my god. I love how you started laughing before you even said it because you're like, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to say it anyway.
That's
Yo,
season
bro,
one,
good.
man.
Yo, dude.
It's time to
I'm with you.
duel.
Yeah.
Yo, my favorite thing about that did duel thing is that, like, I feel like I remember it a lot less jagged and early 2000s like bad editing in Adobe Premiere than it was where it's just like him going like it's so fucking weird.
Bro, watch out for Sean when he collects all 5 Exodia cards.
Oh, that's so funny that you say that. I got a birthday gift from a friend of mine. It's a Yu-Gi-Oh game on PlayStation. He still plays the card game. He wants to engage with me in some way because that's how we used to, that's what we used to get together for. So he got me this game, and that's part of why now I want to see the show again. And in the game, I built an Exodia deck. And for those of you who maybe are familiar, you're like allowed 1 copy of each piece. And if you get them all, you win the game. Well, the game doesn't have those rules, so like I have multiple copies of Exodia pieces in my deck. It's a pretty fun game.
Is this like a newer game or is it an older one?
Yeah, it's called Legacy of the Duelist.
Okay.
Oh,
Link
that one's
Evolution.
good.
Was that for the Game Boy Advance?
No, I think the DS.
No,
He just
guys,
said it was
it's
new.
on PS4.
Yeah,
I
just asked that question.
How could it be?
Oh, new?
I was like, is it new or is it old? And he's like, no, it's new. Like, so it's like not on the DS then.
Oh my god. Shit, that's fucking
Fucking
rough.
amateurs.
Oh wait,
over
is
here.
it part of a like what number is it?
Number? What do you mean number?
There's like 30
there's-
Yu-Gi-Oh games. What do you mean? What number?
Yeah, no, because there's different Legend of the Duelist. I think it goes up to like 6 or something.
Well, this is called Legacy of the Duelist.
Okay.
And it doesn't have a number. It's just called Link Evolution. So give it
I
a
used to
shot,
fuck with
Mark.
those games back in the day. Those were so much fun.
Yu-Gi-Oh games are very good.
I remember
Yes.
the one on the GBA that Phil's talking about. I remember if all the cards had like a code at the bottom of them, and you could like scan your cards in and remake your own deck, which was just fucking rad. It was like, wow, this is amazing. I love this.
I used to spend an insane amount of time sitting there putting those damn codes in.
Yeah, dude. When I first bought the game, I cataloged every card I had and was like, all right, cool. I have almost the whole set now in game. Like, let's play.
Not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but there was a PlayStation 2 game that was not really traditional Yu-Gi-Oh! It was called Duelist of the Roses.
Yes.
That
Yes.
was like my
Sean
all-time
just
favorite
came
game.
alive.
It was so cool because it was like a board game type setup where you would like have a king like in chess, and then you would summon different monsters and like.
Oh, I remember that. I never played it,
was
but I remember.
so cool.
I think I remember seeing like a Game Informer piece about it or something.
And there's like no other game like it. I've looked for other games like it, and nothing exists like it.
Weird.
And like there were some jankety things in the PS2 version. Like it was really difficult to get like a Blue Eyes White Dragon or a Red Eyes Black Dragon or a Dark Magician, and it's I've like gone back to play the PlayStation 2 just to play this game.
Dude, when you come here, we're playing that game.
Hell yeah. I love that game so much.
Yo, listen. No, you guys got to come here and do it so I can record you playing it. We're going to make a Let's Play.
I'm not allowed. The coronavirus keeps me from traveling.
Well, I don't mean right now.
Oh. Well, you know, Phil
Sean,
could come right now.
We
Wear a
always
mask.
like the same cool shit.
That's right. That's right. You know who else likes cool shit? Steve, who wrote to us. He likes cool stuff. He likes us,
Nice.
and I guess that makes
More
us
cool
cool.
stuff.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Pete, you want to read what he had to say to us this week when he wrote in?
Yeah, so Steve wrote in on our last episode, 192, and said, "Hey pals, 2 quick thoughts. Regarding the Zero issue for Empire, I agree it's not really done correctly. To me, a Zero issue should be for bringing whatever you need to know, history or context-wise, to the forefront. This issue does an okay job at filling in some of the historical context, but it also acts as basically issue 1 of the series. I'd rather a Zero issue spend a few pages explaining what has happened in the past. Don't just put in editor's note next to a dialogue box saying, see this issue. Show us what happened, get everyone up to speed in a fun way, flashback, discussion between the characters, whatever. When they just say, well, one day, long ago, this happened, and that's it, what's even the point? They should be going deeper as far as the setup. To me, the Avengers getting a distress call on the moon. Also, where are the Inhumans right now? Isn't setup? Sorry, that was like an aside. Where are the Inhumans right now? Isn't setup? It's just the story. It's issue 1. Zero should set up the history of the story, not just start the story. I hope this makes as much sense reading aloud as it does in my head and isn't coming across incoherent. No, you're totally good here, Steve. I enjoyed the issue and the coloring is awesome, but to me, this is really just an issue 1, and I think publishers just want to say issue 0 now because it sounds cooler. So that's number 1. Let's start there.
I don't know. First things first. I don't know if an issue 0 makes it sound cooler. Like traditionally, I avoid 0 issues because I'm like nothing's gonna happen. This is not where the book actually starts. It starts at 1. That's like been my historical kind of approach to things. I don't think it sounds cooler. To me, it's like, oh, optional.
Yeah, that's how I look at it too. Like when I see a 0 issue, to me, I think of it as this issue exists for people that aren't reading right now, right? Like it exists as context, not necessarily like it's that important. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely think of it as like a marketing tool, but I don't think I don't think of it in the same way as like when there was that period a few years ago where it was like we were getting new number 1s like every other, few months. And that's very much like a marketing tool because people will buy a number 1.
So back in the day, this issue wouldn't have been a 0 issue because Marvel didn't really do 0 issues. At least when I started reading comics, I don't really think I ever saw 0 issues. It would be called Empire, and then it would have an additional name,
Road to Empire.
And yeah,
That's a good example. Yeah, that's a good example.
That's the kind of thing that Marvel would have done in the past. And so the switch to 0, I think what that did was it made people feel like, okay, this is more directly connected than some kind of tie-in. Like it's 0 to, let's say it ends with issue 6, 0 to 6, not 1 to 6, but also you better read The Road to Empire so that you can be caught up. Now, a book called The Road to Empire in 2006, like if there was a book called Road to Civil War, which there is, that would actually just be different events, like different things that have happened in the books that have led to that compiled into a comic, not new content. So for me, the 0 issue is just the same thing they used to do, but adding that 0 so that people feel like it's as must read as 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., etc., etc. It's interesting that you guys feel like it's not necessarily worth your time because it's a zero issue.
Maybe we've been trained that way, and I don't think historically zero issues have really proven the contrary, because I feel like so often the inciting incident of an event is issue 1. Like that would be where it's like, this is why this is turning into an event, right? Maybe zero kind of serves as a preamble, but I just don't think historically. That's a pretty good question. Like, what's the most eventful zero issue to ever drop?
I think to your point, Phil, like I remember zero issues specifically for like New 52 and how they would like introduce characters overall versus a specific plot or like a line. Like there was that whole thing in between, I think like everyone's run from like 13 or 14 or something, that Aquaman Zero, Batman Zero, like it was all stuff that didn't necessarily relate to the plot, but was just like, hey, this is introduction to the character, this is like a thing. So I think to your point on us being trained to react a certain way to a zero issue, maybe some of the publishers are still trying to redefine how we should be accepting it, and if it's to something like this where it has to be preamble to a story or like lead up and give us context, I think that they're still trying to figure that out the same way that we were trying to figure it out while we were reviewing it.
I definitely think they're trying to train us to want to buy zero issues. The question then is exactly what you're saying, Marco, is are they succeeding? And if we're left asking the same questions the publisher is asking, then I question that. I would state maybe that it's not succeeding.
I will say, though, I think to the point that Sean made earlier, I think the way that they're being used is good, because I think it creates like clarity, right? Like for the brand, where it is easy to see like, okay, this is a zero issue for this event or this thing I want to read, so I should probably read this. Like I should pick this up, not like I think Civil War is honestly the best example, or at least the example that I'm the most familiar with, where I remember I don't know if you guys remember at the time or shortly thereafter, Marvel put out that big hardcover for Civil War that was like the 6 issues of Civil War, and then like back matter and art, and like it was, you know, like one of those nice presentation books. But you're missing so much of the story if you just read the 6 Civil War issues, right? Like that, like all of the tie-ins are really important to the actual story, and like a lot of the big beats of Civil War like take place in the side stuff, or like, you know, I think of like the Fallen Sun, Captain America. I only read it as a floppy. I don't know what issues it was, but it was like the aftermath of like Cap being assassinated and everything. Like there's so many bits and pieces that you don't get if you just look at that, you know, what was sold as Civil War. So like I kind of like the idea of zero issues being used as a way to expand a little bit on that without making it feel like some other thing that isn't required reading, right? Like, oh, that's extra, or oh, that's a side story or whatever, when it's really, you know, that's a lot of the meat of the event.
Yeah, I am with that, and I think as an idea, I like zero issues, but I would like to see. I mean, this is just an instance where it went wrong, but there are others like Secret Empire Zero where they went right. So, you know, a miss, but it's okay. Next week we get Fantastic Four, Empire Fantastic Four, and we'll see if that one is a little better.
Yeah, that fills in some of the blanks.
Get on to his next point.
Yeah, so number 2, this is going back a while, but I'm working through your older episodes. When you were reviewing the Infinity event and wondering if someone with no knowledge could follow it, well, I don't know shit coming in. I never read Bendis or Hickman's Avengers or New Avengers or Fantastic Four or Time Runs Out, so I truly knew nothing. And I have to say, I was friggin' lost. I didn't know what the Star brand was, who the builders were, nothing. Now, it was still fun, and the art was tremendous, so I enjoyed it overall, but I'm definitely going to have to go back and read the building stories leading up to it and then reread it. So hopefully that lends some insight on how someone knowing nothing viewed that story. Sorry. Keep it up. Your friendship is evident in the shows, and it feels like hanging out with your, well, pals and talking comics and having fun. Steve.
Thanks for being our pal, Steve.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, not knowing anything about any of those books, I could totally see coming into that and being like, wow, there are a lot of pieces here that I just, whoosh, you know?
So I went in Infinity fairly blind, and a lot of the concepts laid out in Infinity are, as it turns out, in earlier Jonathan Hickman stuff. You mentioned the Builders. That's a Jonathan Hickman idea, and that's something I didn't know going into Infinity because I hadn't read any of his Avengers run. It's been a while since we read that. I think that was like earlier this year. I maybe back in February or something. I think the Hickman stuff's worth going back and reading, but you know, sometimes when you read books like this, you know, like a wiki is a good tool.
Yeah, but I think in this example, like Hickman stuff is really good. So if you liked this, like, it's probably worth going back and reading anyway.
Yeah.
And I think also, like for me, I typically get frustrated by some of these books because of how much you sort of need to know, not just in terms of events, but on an individual character basis to be able to empathize with some of these characters because they have previous actions that result in certain consequences that paint them in certain ways. And I think that that's hard to relate to if you have no context. My advice is always just coming in as open as you can because it makes it easier for you to follow the story. If you're confused, yeah, definitely use a wiki or something. Sure. But to feel the beats, I think you have to just kind of in the moment empathize with what's going on versus try to think about it historically. And that's sometimes hard if you don't know the characters like I do all the time. Or generally like for some of the events. Like if there's context you don't know, you just kind of have to live with that gap and try to fill in the pieces with whatever context you can.
I really love comic books, and I think that what we're talking about is one of those things that's I think it's fairly unique to comics. And we're seeing it now with the movies too, where comic books don't often have like a fantastic starting point for you. And, you know, you could say, all right, I'm going to start right here with, you know, Avengers #1 by Jonathan Hickman. Cool. You don't know what the history is with the Illuminati. You don't know necessarily the history of these characters. There's so much you don't know. And you could say, I'm going to start with Infinity. And you start with Infinity and it's like, wow, this is so crazy. What's happening? And there's so much for you to go back and enjoy that you can pick up and read and be like, oh man, this is incredible stuff. And other mediums don't have that in quite the same way. Yeah, you could start watching Game of Thrones in season 5 and then go back and watch all those other seasons, but they have like a hard starting point and a hard ending point, and that's it. And comics have so much more for you. More mainstream comics, I guess, like Big Two stuff.
Superhero stuff.
Yeah, superhero comics are like that. But it's unique and it's pretty cool. And with the movies now, you know, you might start watching the movies with Guardians of the Galaxy 2 or like Avengers 3 or something like that. And there's so much more out there for you to consume. I love that. I'm glad that you are going back and checking out our older book clubs and things like that. I think if you enjoyed Infinity, there's absolutely no reason to not go back and check all that stuff out. And go read Secret Wars as well. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. You
will love it. I promise. And then as far as your point about our friendship and stuff, thank you, man. I really appreciate that you're enjoying the show. And I appreciate that you are a pal of ours. So thank you. And if you're not on our Discord server, you should come hang out.
Yeah, man.
I think you'll have a good time.
Come join us.
I love that we've tricked everyone into thinking that we're friends. It's great.
We're just very good podcasters.
We're great
Well.
actors.
And then Steve did have a PS. He said, "PS, do you guys still do the Video Game Pals podcast? I remember seeing it a while ago in my show searches, but I can't find it anymore." So, yeah, the show's been on hiatus since episode 100, which was quite some time ago, and I did not expect the break to be this long. I'm always thinking about what the right way to bring that back is. So, keep tuned.
Well, there you have it.
All right. I like it. You know what just had a birthday? What else just had a birthday? We established Kale in America, but what else? Anybody got any ideas?
Mario.
Oh.
Sonic.
No.
I guess I have to take a guess too.
It's a movie.
Oh! Back to the Future.
No.
Shit. It did though. It did have a birthday recently.
Is it?
What podcast is this?
Is it Alien or Predator?
It's Spider-Man 2.
Oh, swing and a miss, boys. Swing and a miss.
Yes.
The operative word being swing.
Sling and a miss.
Spider-Man 2 just turned 16.
Fuck. Oh my god.
Whoa.
That makes me feel so old.
Yeah.
Somehow thought it was older.
June 30th. I know. I was like, wait a second, really? But yeah.
It's like, how old was I when that fucking came out?
Well, how old were you on June 30th, 2004? Because that's
Where were you June 30th, 2004, Pete?
I was watching Spider-Man 2. I don't know where.
Unlikely story.
It is.
I was too. I think it's amazing that movie has endured in the hearts and minds of fans for so long. It's not crazy because it's not like it came out in the 80s or something. It's not like a little known movie. Obviously, it's a massive success.
Yeah.
But we've had so many more Spider-Man movies come out since then, so many more comic book movies, that this movie feels kind of small in comparison. And yet, if you think back to 2004 and what it was like when this movie was coming out, I mean, it was a really big deal. Like, it really mattered that Spider-Man 2 was coming out. And every time that I saw this movie in theaters or Spider-Man 3, the crowd felt so engaged in a way that they're not always. It was something truly special about this movie in particular, and Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 3 as well. I mean, everybody hates it now, but every audience that I saw that movie with was along for the ride with every beat.
Yeah. We talked about that Sean, I think we both have said how, like, coming out of that movie at the time, I was like, oh, that was so hype. And then it wasn't until, like, the second or third time where I was like, this is really not that good, like, compared to the other ones. But I don't know, man. I think that there is, like, a lot of hindsight where people look at those movies now and, like, criticize things about them. And they're certainly not above criticism. But I really think the first two Spider-Man movies are special. And I think particularly, like, the first one hit at such a, like, relevant time socially that I think that was such a huge part of why it was a big success and, like, why, like, we as Americans really connected with it, you know? And, like, I think that really helped the juice going into Spider-Man 2 because that first movie was such a, like, cultural moment, you know, that, like, the idea of the follow-up to that was so exciting.
I think Spider-Man 2 is the best live action Spider-Man movie we've ever gotten. I don't even think it's close, really. I think it's really in its own tier of goodness. And it's funny because you're right, in the culture there was a real fervor about Spider-Man 2. People were just so excited to see it, and there was something really cinematic about it from its conclusion too. And the music's really good in those movies. I still fondly remember how the score goes in those movies. One thing that's often criticized, for better or worse, in many of the MCU movies is the lack of a memorable or like score.
Theme.
Like the Avengers have a memorable score, like the main Avengers theme, but beyond that,
it's like it though.
Yeah. That's really it, right? just a all around terrific movie. And that was like so definitive for my childhood. And another thing is I remember these two Spider-Man movies being the launching point for a lot of people my age going to read comics. Specifically, I don't know if this was your experience, Pete, but reading Ultimate Spider-Man.
I actually got into Ultimate Spider-Man a few years later after it had already kind of been established. But the first Spider-Man movie was definitely huge in cementing my connection to the character because I had already liked Spider-Man as a kid. Like I had a lot of those like super cool toys that came out in the 90s, and like I watched the cartoon and stuff.
The cartoon made good toys.
It was really the first Raimi movie that like I think I've told this story on the show before, but it was like around the time that my mom had cancer, and you know, like for whatever reason that like I connected with like the Uncle Ben storyline in it, you know, like through that, and kind of like taking this painful thing that happened to you and trying to turn it into something positive. Like that really struck a chord with me at a really important and impressionable time, you know? And I think that like is why I connected with Spider-Man the way that I did, you know?
Yeah, I think that character in those movies really helped. It really had that everyman feeling. Like Tobey Maguire, your mileage on him as an actor may vary, but I think that those two movies really did a good job of making him feel like an everyman because it really connected to those early Steve Ditko and Stan Lee stories where he's really just trying to balance life and doing a terrible job of it.
Yeah, he's just kind of down on his luck. And
something that you don't see with any Marvel or DC movie these days is like the movies had really good synergy with these games that were coming out at the same time that were excellent for the time.
Those were so fun. The first two are so good.
Spider-Man 2, the video game, I mean, I don't know how good it is if you go back now, but if you were alive back then and into video games, then you probably know how well regarded this game was. Spider-Man 2 was like the game, certainly the comic book game at that time for many years. There's probably still people who would have said it was the best Spider-Man game up until Marvel's Spider-Man came out last year or a couple years ago. Whatever.
I'd say that's pretty like except for maybe Ultimate Spider-Man on the PS2, which also was very good.
That was really good.
Like Spider-Man 2 was like, I think until Arkham Asylum, it was like the benchmark for superhero games of like, this is the best one we've gotten so far.
And you don't really see that with like movies anymore. Like Star Wars Revenge of the Sith had a game that came out at the same time. Like this was like a thing that was common practice, but like, was there, I don't know, was there a Dark Knight Rises game? Not really.
I mean, that's like that. Licensed games in general are just a trend that really fell off over time.
Right.
They were bad by and large. Like a lot of those games sucked and it was a ripoff, and I think they stopped selling. So, I mean, there was a Captain America game. There was an Iron Man game. That Iron Man game, I've said it here on the show before, that was the worst gift. It was the worst gift I've ever gotten. In terms of like, a gift related to what I actually like. Yeah, that was the worst gift I've ever gotten.
Did you have it on Wii?
No, on PlayStation 3. And it was disgusting.
My buddy rented the Wii version, and I remember we played it for like an hour and a half, and we were like literally were like, "Yo," to his mom, like, "We got to go back to Blockbuster. This is bullshit. Like this game fucking sucks." We took it back that day, and we're like, "Nah, like forget it."
I wanted to read this tweet. It's from @PSN Games UN, and it says, "I believe Roger Ebert summed it up perfectly. Quote, the movie," referencing Spider-Man 2, "demonstrates what's wrong with a lot of other superhero epics. They focus on the superpowers and shortchange the humans behind them. Spider-Man 2 continues to be the best on-screen adaptation of the character." I think that is something that I wish the movies would take a cue from a little bit more. If anything could be learned from the original Spider-Man trilogy, it's that people care just as much, if not more so, about the person under the mask as they do about the powers that character has. And I think one of the reasons why those Spider-Man movies connected so well is because of how great a job everyone involved did in bringing it to life in a real way. Peter felt like a person. He felt like a human, not just a walking stick with powers. And since then, we've gotten so caught up with the powers that these characters have and what they can do that sometimes we don't stop and let moments breathe and let them be humans.
Yeah. And I just wanted to make one point about with Peter. It reminds me of something that Phil said before, where like I think, especially now, I think there's been a lot of like people like to shit on Tobey Maguire, right? And like you said, your mileage may vary with him as an actor. But what I think he really does well in those movies is he comes across as vulnerable. And I don't think that that's a thing that superhero movies are interested in portraying most of the time. You know, is like, even if a character has doubts in themselves or whatever, like I feel like Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, you know, there's a lot of just like real human struggle that he gets across really well, you know, and it's like less about, you know, the struggle of being Spider-Man and more about just like the struggle of like, you know, not letting down the people in his life, you know, and trying to be a good person and those sorts of things. And I think he has an earnestness to him that I think plays really well.
I think of other Spider-Man movies, that, you know, the Andrew Garfield movies. Does he ever feel vulnerable in those movies? You know, he's a cool kid. He winds up with like Emma Stone. Like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like Spider-Man in those movies.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I don't even want to get into that debate today.
Okay.
We're just here to
We're talking about
Spider-Man
Spider-Man 2.
But just thought we would acknowledge the 16 years that it's been since Spider-Man 2 came out. Sam Raimi, of course, going to be returning to comic book movies with Doctor Strange 2. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
So
hopefully
wild.
he can bring a little bit of, you know, what he did with the Spider-Man franchise over to the MCU. Let's get into the Pals polls, and we've got a lot of other things going on today. So, you know, strap in, because we're going to be talking about Marvel getting the rights to a couple different properties, a couple new properties, and Tom King goes head-to-head with Superman, which
He's
is
going to lose.
an interesting story. Actually, I think he won.
Oh, no. He had kryptonite.
Yeah,
he is
he
bald.
won. But let's get into the Pals polls. We've got Killadelphia Volume 1 from Marco.
That's where Pete
So-
and I live.
What's up, baby?
So this is a, I think it deals with like vampires and whatnot. But I remember it. I remember seeing some news about it and it being a good book. Be sort of teeters between horror and like mystery. And it's written by Rodney Barnes, Jason Sean Alexander. I don't know too much about it, but just put it on my list.
Awesome. I've actually heard good things about this.
Wasn't that on the Eisner list for a few things or something? Like, I feel like I've seen the name a lot recently.
Can't say I remember. Phil, you cracked me up with that Killadelphia. So my girlfriend used to live in Riverdale in New York.
The
no.
Bronx
TV show.
She going to Pop's chocolate shop and going to the sock hops, or what's up?
No, it's worse. So they used to refer to Riverdale as I think, and I hope this was a joke, as Triggerdale.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Riverdale is known for being like a very nice, you know, lily white neighborhood.
It's like the
But
nice
they
part of the
referred to
Bronx.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the nice part of the Bronx, and they refer to it as Triggerdale.
Damn.
I used to think that was so funny because it's like I know no one's busting guns.
See, I thought when you said I hope people were joking, I was like, oh no, like are people getting shot over there every day? Like shit.
The new Hell's Kitchen.
That makes it so much funnier
Triggerdale.
that they're just being ironic.
Marco also chose Undiscovered Country, Volume 1.
I think Sean and Phil, you guys read like the first few issues of this, and enjoyed it, and I had been hearing very good things about it. So it's coming out in a collected volume. So I'm jumping on it. I think the premise is interesting, and I'm curious about it.
So based on the last recorded book club that we did, I can tell you, based on like knowing what you're into, that Undiscovered Country is something that you are going to devour because it has an alt history, which is, I think, always cool, and I could see you liking that. But it also has a deep entrenched history in the sense that all of these things are very well planned out and plotted. The book has lots of back matter and things like that for you to follow so you can sort of piece together what's happening. It's epic, and I've been enjoying the book, so I think you're gonna love it too. And I hope you pick it up and really like it.
I got the Humble Bundle for it, and it came included in it. So and actually there's an Image Humble Bundle out that you can get like 20, 30 plus comics for that $18 threshold. And it was included in this one. So yeah, I have it. I'm excited to read it.
That's still going.
Is that
If you
digital
do end up-
only?
It is digital only, yeah.
Oh, gotta pass.
If you do end up devouring it, hopefully it'll serve as a great palate cleanser while you're devouring Onslaught.
I'm gonna need those in between, right?
That's right.
To keep my sanity.
You're not allowed to read any other books other than Onslaught until you finish. No, I can't make addendums. So from Phil, we've got Absolute Fourth World by Jack Kirby.
Yeah, I did not notice this. This is gonna kill. First of all, the omnibuses of the Fourth World series are really expensive because several of them are out of print. This collects Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen 133 through 139, which is and 141 through 148, where Darkseid first debuts, ironically enough.
What?
And the first 11 issues, that's 100% correct. And the first 11 issues of the New Gods, the Forever People 1 through 11, Mr. Miracle 1 through 18. So what I like most about absolute editions of books, and I only have 3 on my shelf, is they are printed on archival paper, and they're much bigger than a regular trade or a hardcover or even an omnibus, in that it really showcases the art that was how they were made and published. And Jack Kirby, who's truly the king of this industry, I love the idea of really what many people consider like his magnum opus, printed as an absolute. Like, to me, this is a must get if you're just an admirer of the history of this industry.
I'll definitely look at your copy.
So I chose Buffy the Vampire Slayer Willow #1.
Cool.
They're spinning Willow off into her own little thing, and this is awesome. Willow is one of the best characters out of the Buffy universe by far, and she has a really interesting journey in the show. The comic is doing things a little bit differently, but she's still badass and cool, and the creative team is crazy good. Mariko Tamaki and Natasha Bustos. Mariko is a phenomenal writer. She did the Hulk series where She-Hulk was the main character a couple years back at Marvel that I really loved. And unless I'm crazy, she also had a run on X-23, which was very good as well. So I love the creative team. I love Willow. I love Buffy. I'm here for this. I will be buying this.
Awesome,
yeah,
dude.
King.
I'm glad that those have been good for your sake. Like, obviously knowing you're such a big fan, like getting a good continuation of that series must be so satisfying.
It's one of the most satisfying things happening in comics. It gets hard sometimes to get really excited about things that are happening in comics because it's all so repetitive.
Yeah.
But this has been fresh and exciting because, you know, we went through a lot of years where the Buffy comics were all right, you know, and sometimes less than all right. And this is just incredibly awesome. And hopefully inspiring more people to go back and watch the series. So great stuff.
I did real quick just want to call out the Image Humble Bundle that Marco referenced. It's called the Image Showcase, Comic Showcase Bundle. And as of the day that this goes live, you still have 15 days to pick it up. Definitely go check it out if you're an Image person or if like you've been thinking about it and you like reading digital. They're so like you're getting like several full series here.
Yes.
Like you get like fucking all 6 volumes of Nailbiter, like all 5 of Black Science, like it's like it's a ton of shit here. Like 5 volumes of Criminal, 2 volumes of Killer Be Killed, like we said, which we just did our book club on, 4 volumes of Monstrous, 2 of Snot Girl, 3 of Invincible, my favorite book, Sex Criminals, you get 2. Like it's fucking insane. There's so many goddamn books on this list.
They do these once every few years, and it's always a really good deal.
Yeah. I personally, I think this is like probably the best Image bundle that they've done for my taste anyway. Like they're always good, but this one is like several books that I either like 500% stand by or that I've been really eager to check out and never took the plunge on. So I'm definitely gonna pick this up. And you get all of them for $18. That's a fucking steal.
This is probably the most robust because I had actually gotten one previously back in like 2017 or something. And as I was looking for the email confirmation for this one, that one popped up and it was like, oh, the number 1s of all these or like maybe some collections. But this is legit like
whole
everything.
runs
Whole
of great books.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the news and kick things off with a bang. Marvel has acquired the rights to publish comics based on Alien franchise and the Predator franchise.
Woo!
So only
guys are ready. Go ahead.
IGN broke this news exclusively, and in the announcement, debuted some crazy art.
Okay. I'll have to check that out.
Ooh, damn. That fucking David Finch cover, I guess?
It's just teaser image.
Damn, that looks fucking sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're both very good.
It's crazy. The one with Predator holding the Iron Man helmet on top of the Fantastic Four Baxter building is like, what the hell? That's amazing.
Yeah, that looks like the kind of thing you'd see at like his booth at Comic-Con, you know? Of like, oh, it's like a cool commission, you know, kind of
I thought that was the Avengers building.
Oh yeah, it definitely is Avengers Tower. He's standing on
sorry. Yeah, it is.
I could totally see. It looks like the 4. Yeah.
It still looks like a 4 to me.
I think Marco's right though, because it's like the way that
it
it's
has like Iron Man.
It doesn't matter. It's also the way that it's arced. Like it looks tighter than the 4 is like wider. But
yeah,
I totally see.
In any event, yeah, this artwork is crazy gorgeous. Marvel has been acquiring a lot of things lately. They got Conan the Barbarian. They got the Ultraman stuff. They got the rights to publish Ultraman comics. And now they've got Alien and Predator. But of course, Disney now owns the rights to both franchises. So this is I think this was probably always going to happen in some way. Hopefully Dark Horse got a good chunk of change out of this deal. But otherwise, this is exciting. CB Cebulski said, "There's nothing more thrilling than a story that will keep you at the edge of your seat. And Alien and Predator have delivered that time and time again. I can clearly remember where I was when I saw each of these modern masterpieces for the first time, and reveling in how both masterfully weave extraterrestrial dread and drama into some of the most iconic scenes we've ever seen on film. And it's that legacy that we're going to live up to."
I hope you guys are ready for the Darth Vader versus Alien versus Predator versus Conan versus Wolverine movie.
Versus Mickey Mouse.
Versus
X Kingdom Hearts.
Is that gonna be the new secret word?
Yes.
Jesus Christ. I hope not.
Oh, Pluto, I have the Infinity Gauntlet, bitch.
I'm not that worried about that, honestly, because like they've shown restraint with that so far, right? Like
Shucks.
Conan's in the Marvel universe, which is weird, but other than that, it's not like it hasn't, had that much synergy. So
Pete, can I
It's
hear
also-
Donald?
no, I got nothing. My dad does a great Donald. I'll call him if you want.
It's also with the Conan thing, it really isn't that weird. Like maybe if you haven't read it and you're just reacting to the news of it,
Right.
but in the books it's weirdly normal. It's very weirdly normal how he kind of just has fit in so far. He's a member of the Savage Avengers, but other than that, he hasn't it's not like he's sitting around having a beer with Iron Man or anything like
Sure.
that. Like he's there, it's a thing, but it's not that big of a deal. Weirder, of course, would be if Darth Vader were to be in the comics, and there's been no sign of that. Phil, do you want to give us the routine about how it's bad for one entity to own everything? Do you want to?
Just get that out of the way.
I mean, there's a whole fucking episode where Disney acquires Fox that we did. It sucks shit. It's bad. I don't give a shit that they're publishing books about Predator and Alien. Monopolies are bad for competition and they're bad for the country, but whatever. You can go back and listen to my whole spiel.
Cool. Wow.
That is episode 126 for you listeners. And actually, we also discussed the return of Jonathan Hickman in that. It's coming back to Marvel, so
Wow.
some added bonus there.
Big episode.
Wow.
I might go listen to that one.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like this is a bigger deal because of how long Dark Horse has had the license. According to the IGN article, they've been publishing since 88 and 89, respectively, for Alien and Predator.
Yeah, years.
So that's fucking insane, right? Like, they've been going for ages and ages. So while I think the point that Phil referenced the past episode to is obviously a good one, there's something to be said for the idea of, like, these have been in the same hands for so long. Like, now it'll get in some new creative hands. Something new will happen with it. That's potentially interesting. I am definitely a fan of both Alien and Predator, but it's not necessarily something that I'm, like, itching for a comic for. Like, if they're good,
it's so good, though.
I might check them out. But, like, I don't know, like, the first Alien is my favorite horror movie, and I think every other entry in the series after that is worse than the one before. Like,
Aliens is very good.
Aliens is cool, but it's very different. It's an action movie, and like I like it for that, but that's kind of it.
I kind of feel like both things have dried up. Predator is another excellent action movie. Predator 2 is not very good. Predators was okay. That was the one with Adrian Brody. But for the most part, I just kind of feel like these aren't things that really merit franchises. Like, the novelty was in their first, like the first thing that came out for both of them. Mm-hmm. Predator was an awesome, like, man versus beast kind of premise for a movie that they did. And Alien is the tagline in the movie says the whole thing. No one can hear you scream in space, and the movie does a really good job of portraying that kind of just horror and isolation. And so it's been really diminishing returns because Alien is a terrifying movie. At this point, the xenomorph is is an iconic image in pop culture. It's not scary anymore. So
I think that, yeah, go ahead, Marco.
Just with respect to it being in the comics, I've been a fan of the Alien comics. I think the most recent Predator one that I read was it was like Predator versus Archie, and
I
do
remember reading that.
Yeah,
it's good. It's fun. It's goofy. Like obviously that was a different novel concept, but the Alien stuff in particular in the comics realm has been very good. Most recently, Alien 3, which is based off the original script from William Gibson, who is going to be writing. I think he wrote the Neuromancer.
Yes, I love that book.
And dude, like that's a really good book. Brian Wood had recently written an Alien series. It ended up getting canceled, but it was good. Like the comics, I think are there. They provide that atmosphere and that aesthetic, which I appreciate. To the point on it being the movie and that being sort of the very first, like the inception of it and how much impact that had. I do think that at least in the comics, it translated well to the medium, especially for something like related to horror. So I when this came out, I was excited. To whatever extent they integrate it into the Marvel universe, we'll see. I don't think that they will, but as long as they can provide these stories, I'm excited for that.
As long as we don't get a Prometheus comic.
Ugh.
Nah, that was
I
right.
love that movie.
That was a good movie.
Yeah. So I feel that there are a lot of people who are not happy with this news, and I think that, you kind of just have to get over it. You're not stopping the machine. Disney already owns the rights to both of these properties.
Yeah.
And it is what it is with that.
That's why I didn't go on a whole thing, because it's like it's done.
Yeah, at this point, it's like it's done and dusted.
Yeah, if you complained about it before and you're complaining about it now, it's whatever. The fact of the matter is that Marvel has done a tremendous job with the Star Wars franchise in comics.
Mm-hmm.
They've put out some of the best Star Wars content ever in the comics that they've done. And you just look at the track record. It's been brilliant. The Conan stuff has been very good. So I have very little doubt that their Alien and Predator content will be anything less than what we've seen with Star Wars. They threw their best creative teams and their best minds at those books, and the results were phenomenal. Those early years of Star Wars books at Marvel, gold. Vader down, gold. All that stuff.
Let me ask you guys a question.
Yeah.
Who would you want to see as a creative team on these books?
I don't know.
That's a toughie. I don't know.
Who at Marvel has good horror chops right now?
The first person I thought of would be like Brian Edward Hill.
Why?
I don't know. I feel like he'd be really good at a Predator book.
I think
I could see it.
Yeah.
I think Cullen Bunn would be good for Predator. I mean, for Alien rather. He's done previous monster stories, like horror's his bread and butter. That'd be very cool.
Maybe Al Ewing.
Oh wow. There's a way to make an Al Ewing Alien book work, but I think it would probably be a little bit bigger than just a 5 people on a spaceship dealing with the monster thing.
His spin on Prometheus, basically.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I really want to see Jason Aaron for some reason in the Alien space. Okay. I don't know why that name keeps ringing out in my mind. I'm more intrigued probably by the artists who could be involved in a project like this. Marvel has strong artists. David Finch, if he's up for the job, this work he did here is crazy good. And I would love to see him do a book like this, but remains to be seen. We probably won't hear anything about this again for quite some time, just because of everything that's going on and how Marvel's release schedule is very relaxed. They probably don't want to put out such a massive thing with the state of comics right now. So we'll probably be waiting a while, but cool announcement nonetheless.
Well, one last note there is like, Sean, you were talking about how great you have been enjoying the Buffy stuff. And that was another thing that after it got out of Dark Horse's hand and went somewhere else, that it, turned around a little bit and got like a kind of a fresh restart. So I don't know. Here's hoping.
Yep. Guess what, guys?
Chicken butt.
Got him.
Boy, you sure showed me. Wait, is that Kale?
That did sound like
well, that was a kill laugh.
That's his
Wasn't it?
cackle.
Knull is coming.
Oh, sweet. Newell. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I love that guy.
Yeah.
No, I
Go
don't
way
know.
back.
So this week, Marvel put out a teaser image that simply says Knull is coming 2020. This, of course, being a teaser for an event that will follow up on Absolute Carnage, and it's going to be a Knull event. Now, you probably don't care about Knull. That's fine. Why should
He's
you?
cool.
Yeah. Well, the internet had a field day with this announcement. Can we first talk about this font? Can we pull up this teaser image and can we talk about
Yeah, we can.
Phil,
like it.
can we talk about this font?
It's really spooky. It kind of looks like Goosebumps.
Is that what it evokes for you?
Look,
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Now, Sean, hold on. Sean, what do you see?
Well, I'm more intrigued by what you see, but let me add some context for you. Because Twitter has been the champion when it comes to this news story. So here's a tweet from Ready Cop, at Ready Cop. It says, Knull literally means fuck in Norwegian. Not even like the swear word fuck, but the actual act of fucking someone. And look at that font.
Now, are you telling me that Knull isn't coming?
Well, now I'm asking you, how do you feel about the fact that Knull is coming?
dude,
No came, bro.
that's the thing. Like this whole image, like it's just it's one of those examples where you're like, how did no one in the room clock
Be
this?
careful. Let's not get in a sticky mess here.
I don't want to gum up the works too much. But it's like you look at this and it's like, I'm guessing what's behind is supposed to look like tendrils or like spray paint or something, but it's just white goo like dripping down a wall, and then it's in big drippy white letters, Knull is coming. It's like, what the fuck, guys?
No,
Someone
see,
get a
Knull-
damn sock.
that the stuff behind it, Knull came. The
That's what I'm
new
saying,
stuff.
dude. He's here. He has arrived.
So,
Yeah,
Marco, you're the expert. Are those tentacles behind him?
No. So those are actually streaks. Those are
Tell me more.
those are drips.
I don't know, dude. This is ridiculous.
So yeah, Goosebumps font. Yeah.
And it is a Goosebumps font if it was in green, but when it's white and the word coming is there, it's very suggestive.
I
So
love
let me
it.
ask you guys this: is anyone into it?
Sean.
When I first heard the news, I was excited because I actually know who Knull is.
Marco is coming.
That too.
We should
And-
take this image and we should do that to it. Should write Marco is coming.
Oh yeah,
Oh, can we find this font?
I'm pretty sure I have this font in my font library.
that might be one of the months on our calendar. I don't remember.
I saw one that said Goop is coming.
Was the text pink?
No. Go ahead, Marco. Sorry, man.
No, it popped up in Silver Surfer Black, the character. It was one of the villains that he had to fight and that was a cool battle. I like the design. When I saw this, I actually didn't make the connection because it reminded me of Moore's art, and I was like, oh shit, I wonder if that would be something that'd be interesting. Like I could see that happening, but and I had no idea that it has anything to do with Venom and Carnage. So that didn't make sense to me.
This was a stroke of genius.
Oh, that was such a good pun. I really appreciated that.
Oh my God, Phil's mind is working overtime right now.
Phil, did they think long and hard about this font?
Honestly, looking at it, it looks like they blew their load a little too quickly.
I was gonna say it looked a little premature.
Oh, I love it when a bit comes together.
Oh boy.
So Donnie Cates responded to, people talking about all of this, and he said
that was definitely a mistake. Don't reply.
He said, I got you talking about it though, huh? And he used a GIF of Harry Osborn from Spider-Man 3, where he's looking back at I think he's looking back at Peter, and he's like doing that wink.
Yes,
yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
When he's eating and he's saying so good. He used a GIF of that.
That's so funny.
Donnie Cates got hairy palms.
I guess Donnie Cates likes sticky wings.
Oh.
All right. Someone's always got to take it too far.
Nasty.
What do you mean? He put the GIF up. That's not my fault. They're sticky wings.
All right.
God.
Well, we've had our fun.
Let's clean it up.
Let's clean it up for sure. Let's button up.
Get the squeegee.
Ooh.
We all have some kind of clarity now. That's good.
Well, Knull is coming. But as it turns out, Scott Lobdell is going. Scott Lobdell has been, he is electing to leave his book Red Hood and the Outlaws. He said on Instagram, I'm stepping away from only remaining freelance work on Red Hood and the Outlaws, effective immediately. Issue number 50, out in October, will be my final issue. While I'm profoundly grateful for the last 10 years on a book telling the story of a tragically flawed man in search of redemption, I depart certain that my vacancy will be filled by a dynamic new voice. Hashtag Red Hood and the Outlaws. Hashtag freelance life. Hashtag buy. Okay.
Oh, cool.
An exit stage left? What are you, fucking snagglepuss?
Yeah.
Heaven the Murgatory.
This might seem like just a nice goodbye to a series that he's loved for the 10 years that he's worked on it. But there's more to this than meets the eye, because with all of the, sexual misconduct and assault and, things, all these allegations that have come out over the last few weeks, we've been covering them here on this show. Scott Lobdell's name actually came up again. It had come up before. Bleeding Cool had published an article about him last year, and his name came up again throughout this whole thing that's been going on. And it looks like he's using this opportunity to get the hell out of Dodge. Instead of addressing what has been said about him, he is just leaving. Now, according to Bleeding Cool, they say that in April, they reported that the book would be ending with issue 50 anyway. But the timing of his post coincided with the return of these allegations. It was like this same day that I saw him make this announcement that I saw people talking about him as it relates to sexual misconduct. And if you read what he wrote on Instagram, he said he's profoundly grateful for the last 10 years on a book telling the story of a tragically flawed man in search of redemption. It's almost like he's talking about himself.
Yeah.
What? No.
It definitely feels that way.
Him? No.
Yeah. So
Wait, but hold on. If it's gonna end at issue 50 anyway, then who is this voice that will be backfilling a now canceled book?
I think what he meant was that there will be a new number one with a
New team.
different, writer behind it. Does he know who that person is? I don't know. It hasn't been announced, but yeah. The internet, though,
outlaws out there, all the outlaws out there are gonna be so disappointed because this was such a big. That's what the fans of the book are called. They're called the outlaws, right? They're just gonna be so devastated that this book is coming to an end. It's such a good quality book.
Scott Lobdell doesn't have a lot of fans, at least on Twitter, because people were very happy to see him going. And that's divorced from whatever the allegations were, just straight based on his creative prowess.
Yeah. I mean, even before any of the allegations, like Kale has always fucking hated him and slung shit at him on the show. I wish he was here now because he'd be doing a fucking backflip.
Oh yeah, that's right.
He fucking hates Scott Lobdell
because he's trash.
I forgot it was primarily Kale who had that axe to grind. Yeah, so
it's just because Phil said, other people on the show have said that he sucks, but Kale will bring him up out of nowhere to be like, yeah, fuck that guy. He definitely has it out for him.
Sometimes I bring him up just so Kale gets fired up.
Just to dunk on him, yeah. Works out. Yeah, this feels like such a weird, way to try and sidestep everything. To me, I read this and it feels like this was already in the works, right? That this was when the book was going to end. And I think, Sean, you said when you introduced this topic, it feels like he's taking this opportunity to go away for a little while, right? And he's like, oh, this big point of my career just ended and this is my last freelance work and I'm looking forward to what comes next, but I'm going to step away and spend some time with my family right now or whatever. It feels like one of those kinds of statements, even though, obviously everybody's got eyes on him right now.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, to tell you just how far back this goes with him, 8 years ago, Alex DeCampi, who has been very vocal on Twitter about the comics pledge and stuff like that, 8 years ago, she felt the need to defend Scott Lobdell on Twitter from allegations. She said, Scott sincerely believes there should be more women writers and artists at DC and has, behind the scenes, quietly been reaching out to women creators to introduce them to senior DC staff. So this guy you're all pasting, he is actually doing more than anyone else at this moment to increase the number of women making mainstream comics. So that's what she had to say back then. And then in 2018, she said, look, Scott Lobdell is so well known for being a harasser that at DC dinners and retreats, the senior DC female staff all make sure he's not sat next to any new young editorial assistants to keep them safe.
Yikes.
So I guess he keeps getting hired because of the quality of his writing. Oh, wait. And then she includes a link to what I presume is some... she provides a link to another incident about him harassing someone else, a link to that person's thread, which is a whole other can of worms. She also went on to say, super important, Scott Lobdell regularly approaches attractive young female comics artists and writers via email and social media to collaborate. He tried it with me years ago. He was still doing this about 3 months ago when he approached an artist I work with. He is not safe. So clearly a history with this guy. Somehow Scott Lobdell managed to keep things going for many, many years and managed to get a whole 50 issues out of Red Hood and the Outlaws. And now he is done. My question to you guys is, do you think that he will work freelance for any of the big two ever again? Or do you think this is the last we've seen of him in the mainstream?
He seems like he's a bug, man. Like, he just won't go away. Can't squash him. I bet he does come back in a couple of years. For like, just again, guy won't disappear.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think it really depends on what happens next. Because I think this is going to come across really cynically, but there's really no other way for me to put it. I think it's pretty clear that like the bigger comics companies don't really care. Right? Like, they don't really care if someone is an abuser or predatory or creepy or whatever until they're called out. So, like, I look at this Scott Lobdell situation right now, right? And it's like, okay, these allegations came up about him. You said the report was last year, right? The first time?
The
Bleeding
first
Cool.
time was the Bleeding Cool article was from last year, yeah.
Right. So that came out last year, and obviously nothing happened, right? Like, he's finishing this 50-issue run that he got to do, which is something that most comic creators will never get the opportunity to do and dream of, right? Is getting a 50-issue run on a book, let alone from a big two with relevant characters. Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, and he's now positioning this in this nice little, like, sidestep. And this story is not the same story that the Cameron Stewart news was, and it's not the same news that the Warren Ellis story was. So I'd like to say, yeah, no, he's probably done with Big Two, and yeah, he'll probably keep doing freelance, and he can, fund his books, his indie books on Indiegogo, and whoever wants to support him will support him, because that's how this industry seems to work. But I don't even know if the ramifications will be that bad for him. Like, if he goes away right now for 2-3 years or even 1 or 2 years and comes back on a new book, is anyone even going to remember that this happened or say anything about it? I don't know.
Also, it kind of feels like that's kind of, I feel like, the move. If you got heat on you, you disappear for a couple of years and you come back and people just seem to forget.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's like a big story, right? Like, there's some people where, like, once it happens, like, you're burned. Like, I think of like the Kevin Spacey situation where he went.
Yeah, but he might come back. Look
he
at
might.
Louis C.K.
Yeah, right. He might. So that's remains to be seen. But, like, I think if you get burned publicly enough like that can be a mark that follows you. I don't know that this is that at all, though. Like, how many people even know this? Or how many people that read Red Hood and the Outlaws, like, are even aware of this? I don't know. Like, I think we've talked about that in the past, about how there's a big difference between people who go to the comic book store and read a comic every week versus people who are, like, on comics Twitter or, like, in a Discord about comics. Like, I think that's a big reason why, like, so much of this happens, is that, like, I think that there are a lot of people who follow characters more than creators, or have publisher loyalty more than writer or artist loyalty. So I bet that there's a bunch of people who read that book who don't even know who the fuck Scott Lobdell actually is.
Yeah.
They like the Outlaws, or they like Red Hood. So yeah, I don't know if this hurts him at all, really. If he's got the savings to go fuck off for a year or two, like, he probably comes back to do something else with no problem.
Yeah, he's gonna come back, and definitely to a big two book. I think this is probably not even like a few years thing. This is probably like a few months thing.
A few hours.
I think it depends on how I forget what the name for it is, but like the comics Me Too thing that's been happening. Like how long does that have echoes? Like, is there another big one that comes soon that continues that conversation, or has that wave crested? And now we won't talk about it again until another big thing happens, right? Like, I think that's going to be the make or break for how long he has to go hide in the shadows before he's able to come back up and everybody forgets.
Well, I think to your point, you mentioned that like yes, he has to disappear, but I think also the way that he was leaving the industry is different. People didn't call him out, and because of that, I think that has less impact on somebody remembering that. He decided to leave, to sidestep, and kind of, to whatever extent, get ahead of it without major news on Twitter or rumblings otherwise. And I think because of that, he's able to sort of skirt around some of the backlash that we've seen. And I think he'll definitely be back on something within the next few months. Like if not the end of this year, probably the beginning of next. I don't doubt that. Yeah, he'll go do some freelance stuff. Maybe he'll fund his own book, but he's gonna be back.
Very cynical, but unfortunately, probably true.
Yeah, it's just the way that this seems to go, right?
Yeah.
I actually don't see him working for. I don't think Marvel would have hired him even if this wasn't being talked about. I just don't. I don't know. I don't really feel like Marvel's looking for him, but I don't see him working for DC again personally.
I hope you're right.
I hope you're right.
Yeah. He just. I don't know. He just has a bad reputation on every level. Like there's nothing. I don't know. We'll see.
I thought it was so interesting, the one tweet you were reading from Alex DeCampi where she was like, so it's been like getting by on the quality of his writing. I'm like, I've never heard anyone say that they think he's a good writer. So like, I don't know what he's getting by on.
I think that's the joke.
Well, no, I that's what I'm saying, right? Like, yeah. I genuinely don't get why this dude has a career if he's at best a mediocre writer and at worst is like a fucking, like a horrible person. Like,
right?
Why is this the guy that you're putting up and giving a 50-issue run? Like, fuck him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's move on and let's update a story from last week about the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. Of course, we discussed that they accepted the resignation of Charles Brownstein, who was the director, after allegations resurfaced of an incident that he was unfortunately involved in, where he was accused of sexual misconduct, based on Taki Soma from 2005. So, old allegations that have resurfaced, for which he, has decided to step down from his position. And now, in addition to that, Paul Levitz is stepping down after 16 years. Jeff Abraham and Kathleen Keller are also resigning. They served 6 and 7 years, respectively. They were all called out. The board was called out for not acting on what they knew about Charles Brownstein sooner. This allegation that I just referenced isn't the only allegation against him. It's just the only one that I've seen of a sexual nature, from what I was able to ascertain.
Wow.
Huh? Yeah.
Paul Levitz. Wow.
Yeah. You say that to say what?
He's been around forever.
Yeah.
Like, this guy has been a big wig in comics for, like, it feels like 35, 40 years. So to step down from the board of directors, damn.
I mean, it's funny you said that. Like, I pulled up his Wikipedia page. It literally says he was the president of DC Comics from 2002 to 2009 and worked for the company for 35 years in a variety of roles. So that's not even.
Whenever there's a documentary about comics, Paul Levitz is in every single one because he's such a, like, in terms of influence, you may not know his name, but in terms of influence, he's up there with Denny O'Neil.
So the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund put out a statement In part, it says, we respect the decisions that Paul, Catherine, and Jeff have made to leave the board. We realize it will be a long path to earning back the trust of our members, supporters, and the industry. We recognize that it's been our inability to react or act at all that's been the cause of pain in our community.
No shit.
Even last week, when we took the necessary action in accepting Charles's resignation, our communications were stilted and clumsy. To everyone who has come forward, we haven't done justice to your bravery, and we are truly sorry. We vow to be better. Yeah, I think that's good. You know, it's good that they seem to want to do better. It's good that they are vowing to, improve the situation over there. I think it might take some time for people to trust them again.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that sucks. And it sucks because this really ought not to be about, like, the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund serves a good purpose. And it sucks that the actions of the people behind the scenes could actually affect people who really need that to exist.
The mission. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I totally feel that way. Like, to me, like, this rings, like, super hollow. And, like, granted, I think anything they said right now would feel that way on some level because, like, the reveal that this organization that I think, anybody who is connected to the comic book industry would look at as, like, overtly a good thing, right? That, like, so many artists and creators supported and raised money for and all these things. And, like, to see that those funds are being misappropriated to support, like, hate groups or, that we had a bunch of people in upper management that were, guilty or complicit in covering up, like you said, like, the sexual misconduct and all this stuff. Like, it leaves a really bad...
Whoa, hold on. I want to stop you because that's not true.
Where am I getting tripped up?
They weren't hiding anything. The Charles Brownstein thing came out. He made a statement about it in 2005.
Yes.
And what people are reacting to is that he was allowed to stay.
You're right. I apologize. I misspoke there. Either way, I guess it's tough to take this at face value, and say like I want to believe that the people that are there are committed to improving the organization and moving forward and all those things like that. You want to take that in good faith, but with having this stuff come out and see where that money was being misappropriated and where there were things that were, shady behind the scenes, it's tough to not look at them with a little bit of, like to not feel suspect about them, to not be looking at them with that increased scrutiny. And I think that's fair. Like, that's fine. They should have that now. But I'm totally with you where I'm just really disappointed. I wish that that this wasn't the case because I think that the mission of the organization is really important and, it's one that, I think is deserving of the support that it got. It's just unfortunate that it seems like there were a lot of people who maybe didn't have the best intentions at the helm. Which fucking sucks.
Yeah, 100%. It's a bummer. And hopefully they take the necessary steps to cultivate people's belief in them again because we need this to exist.
I'm really interested in who the next executive director is. Like, if they bring in somebody who is like a name that we know and trust, and it really feels like we see action from them that feels like it matters, that I think is the best path forward for them right now to like fix their image.
Yeah. Like,
prove it, do the work.
You know who's doing the work? Tom King is doing the work.
But is the work
this week I wanna start this. This is great comic book tweets, and I'm gonna pull tweets that I think are fantastic from comic book creators or people who are very adjacent to the industry. And this
segment
is
on the show.
Yes, this is the kickoff. This is the inaugural great tweet in comics. Because Tom King took on Superman. Not Brandon Ruth, not Christopher Reeves, not even Henry Cavill. He took on Dean Cain this week.
Oh boy.
God, okay.
Yes.
Is that Dean Cain?
So Dean Cain was actually being interviewed on Fox News. Dean Cain is, he's one of those
he's like
guys.
a Born Again, isn't he?
Something like that.
Oh
yeah,
man, I forgot about that.
And in a viral clip from the interview, it's a 2-minute long clip. He's speaking with Ainsley Earhart of Fox, and he said, "I promise you, as Superman, I wouldn't today be allowed to say truth, justice, and the American way." To which Earhart replied, "Oh my gosh, you're right. You're absolutely right." So that went viral. And then Tom King replied to someone linking to this video, and he said, "Motherfucker, I put it in a comic this year."
Love it.
And he includes a link to a comic in which that's the case. It says it's a narration. It's not Superman, and I didn't read the book, so I don't know who this character is. But he says, "I believe in truth. I believe in justice. I believe in the American way." So it's not Superman saying it, but it is in the comic, and I think that's fair to point out that it isn't actually Superman saying it. But
looks like it's a
Dean
soldier,
Cain,
though.
Yeah, I believe it is a soldier. Dean Cain actually replied to Tom, and he said, "Well, kudos to you. I stand corrected. I'm glad you did. What comic is that? Also, the MF part of your tweet, not necessary at all. But if it makes you feel tough, that's okay."
Oh,
Oh my God.
Bro, he's a former CIA operative. He could fucking kill you with a spoon, I bet. Are you kidding me? Like, it's not.
Well, Tom wasn't shy about pointing that out. He said,
Hell yeah.
The MF was an insult because you used your platform to discourage people from wearing masks, which will cost lives, the opposite of what Superman would do. I don't know if I'm tough, but I did fight for my country overseas and didn't just wear a cape in front of a camera.
Damn.
Oh, shit, Tom. Get in the mud.
Tom King is the ultimate savage.
Yo, that's fucking great. I love that. That's so funny.
Now, I think that Dean Cain's trousers were ruffled because he went on to say, "Your insult was off base because I did not use my platform to discourage people from wearing masks. I made a joke. The fact that you can't see it is too bad. Appreciate your service. Using MF in your post was ridiculous and weak. I'm happy to tell you that face to face."
Oh my God, I fucking love when conservatives virtue signal and it's like, I can't take anything you said seriously because you said the F word. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like,
yeah, more people get upset. Like the hard right types, they get more upset about profanity than like action or whatever.
Any real issues.
They're like,
yeah.
All I said is that it doesn't matter if disabled people die from coronavirus. Okay, you didn't need to say the F word. Okay, shut up. Just shut up.
Let's have a little fun here. I just put it up on a screen share thing.
Oh God, dude, you're messing up.
You're
messing up my entire. The YouTube is just.
It's fine. Let's look at some Dean Cain movies. All right, we got Pure Country 2, The Gift. So that looks like a nice little movie.
God, this is like you have I'm so sorry to the YouTube viewer right now. This has just decimated everything. They're getting like 1/4 of different parts of the poster in everyone's screen. It's awful.
This movie has George Strait. That's really good. Here we have A Nanny for Christmas.
Classic.
You can see him right here on the poster.
Is that Dean Cain?
Sometimes great gifts come in unexpected packages. Ooh.
There is heavy editing going on, by the way, in that picture.
We have The Way Home, based on an inspirational true story. It's a family in crisis, a faith tested, a community unites. More like a community full of whites.
Damn.
Did you see, though? That one is family approved, Phil. It's a family approved film.
Couple more here. Home Run Showdown. God. I gotta tell you, the Wikipedia article on this is real thin, but here he is. He's a coach. Sean, you talked about editing. This one is very edited.
That is just bad.
Okay, I'm sharing the screen so you can see what Phil's doing now.
Two more. Sorry, Heaven's Door.
Heaven's Door, great, good.
Yeah, it's Heaven's Dork. When you're open to faith, miracles can happen.
Oh my
Here's
God.
Dean Cain, just looking like a real champ.
Here's Dean.
Last
this
one.
This is making me want to be accepted into Heaven's Door.
Last one. God's Not Dead. This one was kind of famous because it was about a kid who had a near-death experience and said he met God. They made a movie about it, and then later the kid said he was lying. So there you go.
That feels
Dean
like exactly
Cain's
the kind of event that Dean
filmography.
Cain would make a film about. There we go.
So that's the guy we're dealing with, folks.
So the thing that Tom was referencing, by the way, when he said that, Dean Cain was encouraging people not to wear masks, was a tweet that Dean had sent out. It's him. He's on a plane, and he is wearing a mask, but he says, spent most of the day on planes breathing my own CO2. I think I may be Dane Bramaged.
Oh, my God. What a total dipshit.
Yeah.
There's something so fucked up about, the super reactionary right-wing people who are saying I can't breathe in light of the protests that have happened in the last month. It's the most tone-deaf fucking bullshit in the world.
You're not kidding.
You say tone-deaf. I think it's intentional because I truly believe that they are all ghouls.
Maybe. But this is not the place for that conversation. I just wanted to point out the fact that Tom King is a god.
Tom King just fucking annihilating Dean Cain. I love it.
In the most literal sense, go off King.
I love it. I think it's brilliant. I think this is a great way to start off the great tweets and comics segment. And we have, we've not loved all of Tom King's work, but this just might be my favorite bit of Tom King's work so far.
It might be his real magnum opus.
Yo, there's nothing I appreciate more about Tom King as a person than when he makes conservatives uncomfortable and they come for him and he's like, by the way, I'm a veteran. And they're like, oh, fuck.
We respect your service, sir.
I respect your service, but I'm still going to challenge you to a fight, I guess. I don't.
Yeah, thanks for serving in the war, but don't say MF.
It's so good. It's so fucking good, dude.
You can go risk your life to fight terrorists, but if you say MF, you're canceled.
Look, I know you probably had to bury a lot of your friends or whatever, but don't curse, okay? Shut the fuck up, Dean Cain.
And I'll tell you to your face.
On Twitter.
On Twitter. Fucking keyboard warrior over here.
Thanks, Tom, for that great tweet in comics.
My new favorite segment.
All right. So it's already 1.
Let's not break.
And there's no way we can finish the game in time for Marco having to leave. I didn't realize that everybody was going to have to bounce out. It's not going to happen. So I have something else we can do.
Okay.
I guess. Marco, you'll just have to cut out me promoting that earlier in the show.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Marco, when you edit it, would you mind just telling me around when in the show that Sean says that so I know where to cut?
Yeah.
Cool. Let me just make a note real quick.
I gotta take a piss real quick regardless. I'm gonna do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do it too.
Sounds good.
Ugh.
It does? Yay! Yo.
Hey, Petey.
How was your day off, man?
Oh my god, it was awesome.
Good.
I cannot. So Thursday night, I got stuffed crust pizza from Pizza Hut, and watched Jackass 3D, and then watched 7 episodes of My Hero Academia. It was great.
Is that you starting it, or I can't remember?
Yes.
Okay, cool. When you said the other day that you were watching it, I was thinking that was what you were doing. What do you think so far?
That's pretty good.
You must have liked it at least somewhat if you watched 7 episodes of it.
It was the perfect thing for Thursday night, but
Yeah.
like I'm not big on like heavy anime tropes, and the show has a lot of them, and it really drives me crazy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I
like it in spite of those things.
It's pretty good. I'm having fun watching it. It's really crazy hearing Chris Sabat as All Might, though. That's fucking me up. He just sounds like Piccolo.
Oh my god, I never realized that was him until just now. Huh. That's so
it's
funny.
Vegeta, it's Piccolo, it's Yamcha,
Yeah.
Kami. He does a lot of voices on Dragon Ball. Then last night I went over to Louis and we watched Escape from New York, which I had never seen before. That was fun.
Nice.
And we watched the first episode of the 3rd season of True Detective, and that shit was awesome.
Dope, man.
I've never watched the 3rd season of True Detective. The 1st season, of course, is like amazing television. And it has Mahershala Ali, who's like maybe my favorite actor going right now.
Yeah, I feel the same way. He's like top for me. He's such a good. He's like so good in everything I've ever seen him in.
So like, it's been a great few days off.
Good, man. I'm glad you made good use of the time.
Yeah, it's been chill. It's been real chill.
Nice, dude.
Sean,
If
well,
anyone deserves it.
yeah, I feel that way. I feel it in my soul. I haven't had a personal day since fucking January.
Which is
Jesus.
that would be awful if it wasn't 2020.
Right. I mean,
like that would be
thing.
shitty any year, let alone this
right.
year.
And it's some like I feel like I can't take off because there's so much shit happening. Like I feel personally obligated to go to work.
Right.
But I have a 5-day weekend coming up in 2 weeks, so that's what I'm really looking forward to.
Good.
Hell, Sean, I might come up to play fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelist of the Roses because I was like reading into it while we were doing something because I was like, that's all I can think about right now.
You're very welcome to come by whenever you want. So
I have 5 days off. I have nothing planned.
Plan to see me.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
This girl I've been kind of seeing is like, what do you got planned for the 5 days? Implying like, spend it with me. And I'm kind of like, we'll see. This sounds more, I'm more into going and play Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses.
Hell yeah, dude. You can come and you can also make a deck in the other Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that I have. Make some shit deck and beat the computer.
I might have a Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck in this room somewhere. I loved making Red Eyes Black Dragon specialty decks.
There was
a really good card that came out like 6 years ago called Red Eyes Darkness Dragon and Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon specifically.
Yeah, those came out a lot more than 6 years ago, but
oh my god, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. It's like probably like 15 years ago.
No, not the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. That came out in the middle of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
Okay.
Which was
GX is old as shit.
Isn't that like 2010? Like,
let me see what year this card came out.
I'm pretty sure that came out when I was in like high school, but we should probably get going before Marco's gonna leave.
Yeah.
You guys got me down a rabbit hole. I'm sorry.
It's fine. Now, our main topic, I wanted to talk about an article that was published by Time Magazine. And I read it earlier in the week, and there really hasn't been much conversation around it, but it sparked my interest because it ties superheroes into what's going on in the world, specifically in America right now with cops. And the headline of the article, written by Ileana Doctorman, is "We're re-examining how we portray cops on screen. Now it's time to talk about superheroes." So essentially, and I think the article is worth reading. Whether you agree with it or not, it's an interesting point that she's trying to make. It's essentially saying that we've been cleaning up and talking about how we portray cops on television and what we're comfortable showing and things like that. And that superheroes either are kind of like cops or have good relationships with cops, and that they perpetuate the injustices that are being, done across the country against disenfranchised people. That the most likely people being beaten up by Batman are poor, potentially minority people who don't have access to the kinds of wealth and opportunities that a guy like Bruce Wayne certainly has.
Sure.
things like that. I want to read a little bit from the article so that you hear her own words and so that you guys can determine, you know, because we're going to talk about where we land on this thing, you know. So let's see. There's so much to it, and of course it goes into the Punisher aspect and things like that.
Sure.
Superheroes have dominated popular culture for the last decade. They are fixtures of the highest grossing movies and icons to more than just our children. They are beacons of inspiration. Protesters dressed as Spider-Man and Batman have turned up at recent Black Lives Matter demonstrations. And yet, what are superheroes except cops with capes who enact justice with their powers?
With a few notable exceptions, more on those later, most superhero stories star straight white men who either function as an extension of a broken U.S. justice system or as vigilantes without any checks on their powers. Usually, they have some sort of tentative relationship with the government. The Avengers work for the secretive agency S.H.I.E.L.D. Batman takes orders from Gotham Police Commissioner Gordon. Even the villainous members of the Suicide Squad execute government orders in exchange for commuted prison sentences. And even when superheroes function outside the justice system, they're sometimes idolized by police because they're able to skirt the law to get the job done. In fact, real-life police officers sometimes adopt the symbolism of these rogue anti-heroes. Of course, that goes into the Punisher stuff, which we talked about a few weeks ago. You can go listen to that if you want more on that. I'm going to skip past it because we already dealt with that. Most of the blockbuster Marvel and DC movies skirt the issue of who should define justice for whom. Captain America Civil War and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice briefly float the idea of superhero oversight, but both devolve into quip-filled CGI fistfights. In fairness, the Civil War storyline in the Marvel comics more thoughtfully plumbs the depths of that socio-political debate. What's more, given that the creators and stars of these movies have historically been white men, it's hardly surprising that so few reckon with issues of systemic racism, let alone sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and other forms of bigotry embedded in the justice system or the inherent biases that superheroes might carry with them as they patrol the streets or the universe. There's a lot more to this. The article goes on to talk about how we got a Black Panther movie that, does deal with what Black people have had to deal with in America, and it struggles with T'Challa's responsibility in that. And it talks about Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse, and how we got a Miles Morales movie and how great that is. One last thing that I wanted to point out that I thought was worth mentioning is it's not just that superheroes act like members of law enforcement. Sometimes they interact with them directly. Spider-Man has long had a complicated relationship with the NYPD. Last year's Spider-Man video game received some pushback over what many critics called copaganda. In that game, Peter Parker is a fan of the police, even fantasizing about being a spider cop. He spends much of the game fixing surveillance towers for the NYPD. So that's a fine place for us to stop pulling from the article for now. I will probably address it again later. What do you guys make of that?
So I'd like to start taking it back to two examples that were made here, which is where I get frustrated sometimes with this conversation, because I don't think that this conversation is without merit, and I think there are definitely examples of superhero media where I think, like, particularly the portrayal of cops as like everyday heroes, given the context of what's being discussed, is something that I think is worth examining, right? And like the same way that we're examining like TV shows that star fictional police officers and things like that, right? Fair play. Where I get upset when you get these kinds of think pieces, I think a lot of them come from a very top level look at pop culture. And I feel like there are a few things that were said in this article that are references to other cultural conversations we had about this, where similar reaches are being made. Like, to say that Batman takes orders from Commissioner Gordon is, I think, a stretch, right? Like, yes, there's
in
the
the
bat
60s
signal.
he did.
Yeah, sure. In the 60s. It's not the 60s. It's 2020. And, from our generation, like, my perception of their relationship, right, is like, he's his inside guy. He's a cop who he knows is a good dude, who he personally knows and trusts has the best interest of the people of Gotham at heart. They both realize that they have a beneficial relationship working together because Commissioner Gordon knows that there are crooked cops in the Gotham PD, and Batman, needs a certain amount of intel to be able to do his job better, right? So that to me is like a very specific example of Batman having a relationship with a police officer versus Gotham PD. Take it back to the Spider-Man example. I played and loved 2018 Spider-Man, right? I definitely prefer when Spider-Man has an uneasy relationship with police officers. And I definitely remember thinking in that game that some of the cops' reactions to him felt weird, right? Whereas he has, again, a relationship with a detective, Yuri, who is his person who's like helping, giving him intel and that kind of stuff. They're working together. Same kind of Commissioner Gordon situation. The satellites for surveillance and stuff, fair play, right? Like that's another weird thing. But I think when people are like, oh, he idolizes the police or he dreams of being a police officer, that's not my read on that joke. There's a joke throughout the entire game where when he's talking to the police officer who he's friends with, he's joking about the fact that he's Spider Cop and he's like giving himself this grizzled like 1960s cop show voice. Like it's a Spider-Man bit. It's not a Spider-Man loves the police and wishes he was a police officer. That's not what that is getting across. And like if you read that, fine, right? Like art's about interpretation. I definitely think that interpretation is very open to debate. Whereas I think something like Spider-Man assisting in fixing surveillance towers for the NYPD is something that I think is a totally fair criticism. So like I think that when we get into these conversations, people go and reach for these examples that are not really quite accurate when there is actually better examples of, I think, what they're bringing up.
But I think to that point, I think the general theme that superheroes are extensions of a broken system is what sort of jumped out at me, because it identifies that the police structure and the policing in the United States is in disrepair and needs some sort of adjustment that these superheroes then have to insert themselves into. And as that was being read, it did color it a certain way for me, because I hadn't thought of it in that sort of way. You sort of look at it as pretty much black and white. He's just beating the bad guys, right? But to the point where these bad guys could be disenfranchised people, could be people who don't have the money, they live in these poorer neighborhoods. Like that's all not necessarily symbolic, but it does have echoes of how policing is managed generally. And that I think when I thought of that, made me a little worried, because I again, the perspective was new and it hadn't been something I considered. And obviously we're fans of the superhero medium, and I don't think that is what we get out of it. To your point, Pete, art is about interpretation, and I don't think we interpret it that way. And I don't know that most comics readers interpret it that way, but that interpretation that you can extrapolate from those relationships, I do think they're valid.
Yeah.
And to the everyday heroes analogy, I mean, I think of when Superman is I forgot what book we had read, but Superman is like standing somewhere. There's like a wall of, I think, other heroes or firefighters or whatever, and he's pointing out to a police officer that he's like the hero. I think that imagery can tie the idea of superheroes and police together. Sure. Outside of the individual characters. And I mean, if we are really thinking about it, the villains, to whatever extent, are obviously they're wacky, they're crazy. But like, if you put it into more grounded terms, the first thing I thought of was the Spirit, and he fights local neighborhood crime, and he typically does it in poorer neighborhoods. Like the original Spirit was, he was fighting robbers. A lot of the time they would be black. One of the characters was Ebony White, like a parody of black culture. And I think some of that gets kind of rooted. And then you sort of start to process that down the line. Obviously things have changed, but it's sort of hard. Because one of the things that I also thought of was our Killer Be Killed book club. There's an issue where he's on the train and these two bad guys come out, right? Like one's in like a punk uniform and one guy's like a black guy in a hoodie, I think. And and like these are the things that we do from an art perspective to signify that that these are the bad guys. And I think that imagery affects that perception as well. And that's something that you see cops doing, where you can see them affecting people in these poor neighborhoods who maybe look like that. And that paints that picture and continues to tie that. I don't know. I'm just like thinking, processing that. That's just what's come to mind. I do ultimately disagree with the article, but only because of how I interpret the art, how I interpret the stories and interpret the characters.
I think growing up, we all have an image of what a cop is supposed to be. Cop is supposed to be someone that protects the peace and puts bad guys away. And I think most people, that's what they want police officers to be. Like there's an application to the police that I think most people see and they agree with. Now the problem is where that deviates, because in application, police departments around the country don't really protect the peace as much as they maybe should. Now the problem is that they're heavily militarized with weapons that the army use in overseas conflicts to remedy things in this country that don't merit that level of escalation. As a culture, we haven't really looked at the police as an institution until George Floyd died, until he was murdered. Because as recent as 4 years ago, when we would look at police brutality cases around the country, it never really led to that avenue, right? So I think it's safe to say, as a culture, we looked at the police as the idealized version in perpetuity. And so whenever police were depicted in comics, they were often depicted with, I don't think, much scrutiny, as just being kind of a force of justice, which inherently is what superheroes are supposed to be as well. I don't think many comics really want to tackle the concept of what justice is and the cost of justice and all that stuff. And so you have comics where Batman works at the police department. You have comics where Superman works at the police department. You have comics where Spider-Man works at the police department, because we agree on a scale they're fighting on the side of justice.
Ideally, anyway.
That's yeah, exactly. This is all idealized. However, when we rewind 80 years ago, when we were living in a society that was more class aware, unions were stronger, mafias ran rampant in cities and bought police officers, whole departments practically. People were more aware of what a bad cop was. And that's why you would see comic books where Superman would fight the police or something.
Dirty cops.
Because the police were dirty cops. And you would see that in some 70s, some 70s media too. But by and large, since World War II, the police were and have been a force for good. And so I think really what Time Magazine is trying to really get to here is I don't think it matters really that there are comics where the police are basically good guys that put bad guys in jail, because I think by and large that's how culture looked at this. And so it is what it is, right? Because until a few months ago, most of the country thought cops were good, and that's his perception. I think the real question here is looking forward. How do we approach this now? I even think recently of Greg Pak and was it Andy Kubert's Action Comics run on with Superman, where Superman fights a corrupt police, but even then they go through great measures to dictate that the police that they're depicting are very bad cops and cops are good, and that's probably a DC Comics mandate, because that's just like, you know, at the time of like Colin Kaepernick kneeling and stuff, that was like a deep culture war of people saying like, you know, this stuff's disrespecting our institutions that protect us. It's only now that we're really approaching this and scrutinizing it for how problematic it is. Sure. So I think looking forward, I think that's where publishers, writers, and artists really have to look, is how do we approach this with more scrutiny? Because I think it's more evident now as we look around the entire country that as we know it, the police as an institution is foundationally broken and has been for a long time. And calls for defunding the police are getting more and more momentum, because obviously things like having a police officer deal with a person, like a personal dispute in a house, is inherently an escalation. Pulling over a black guy driving who has done nothing wrong except maybe going over a speed limit, and like his color of his skin is like the real inciting incident for why they're pulling over. These are things that maybe don't merit a formal police officer, right? We're having these conversations, and I think Time Magazine is saying there's no reason why comics and movies about comics can't do the same thing.
I have so many things to say. This article frustrated me and it set me on fire. And it's because I feel like there are a few things at play that, first of all, I think she probably unintentionally misrepresents a lot of things. Pete pointed out some of those misrepresentations or misinterpretations of what is happening. There's no way, like, I don't know how you could possibly look at the relationship between Batman and Jim Gordon and say that he is taking orders. Batman's not a cop. Batman does not take orders from Jim Gordon. In fact, more often than not, he does what Jim Gordon says to not do, and takes what Jim Gordon tells him and then goes and does something crazy that Jim Gordon has to deal with. Also, Batman does not like bad cops at all. Batman is probably more distrustful of cops than criminals, because he already knows what to expect from criminals, because they are criminals and they do bad openly.
Look at the Gotham criminal justice system.
Yeah. Whereas Gotham City is overrun by bad cops. And there are so many stories about that it's impossible to count. So I wish that, you know, Ileana had read more of those things to understand that that's just not true. But there's a bigger thing at play. It's annoying to me that white America has now woken up to the problem of police and decided, okay, wait, a black guy got killed by cops? Whoa, police are awful. Get over yourself. This is something that's been happening in the black community for
forever,
decades. We already know that police are corrupt. We already know that there are racist police. And we already know that the justice system is not built to support innocent black people or to protect even guilty black people from undue harm, right? Because just because you commit a crime does not mean you have to die for it. We have a system to determine that. It's not supposed to be determined by a cop with a gun. That being said, just because you figured that out now doesn't mean that the world has to change because of your revelation. And this is what the problem is. This is what always happens. Because white America feels that they run the world, anytime they have a revelation, everything has to change, right?
Yeah.
There is possibility for nuance in this conversation. Spider-Man is allowed to like cops. He can like cops. He can also do his part to get rid of bad cops, which also happens. But that doesn't mean that he can't like them in the video game or have a relationship with good ones in the video game. It's a fair assumption that if Spider-Man likes a cop, it's probably a good cop. Why? Because Spider-Man gets chased by cops all the time. Spider-Man listens to the police radio all the time. He probably knows more about what the cops are doing than the cops do.
Sure.
So there's nothing wrong with Spider-Man liking a cop. That's a ridiculous thing to point out, quite frankly. For him to fix the radios or whatever, why not? Most of the time, police are operating to try to help people. There are bad cops. There are cops that kill people, and that's awful. There are cops that do other bad things that shouldn't happen, and we can talk about that. But we can talk about that without saying that there are no good cops on Earth, right? When we're talking about Black Lives Matter, no one wants to hear all lives, right? We're talking about something specific. We're talking about bad police. The Spider-Man video game just isn't representing bad police. It's the reality of that video game. When it comes to Marco's point about the way that people outside of comics view superheroes, well, I got a news flash. If you don't know about a thing, you don't have to have an opinion about it. And I'm not saying this to disrespect the person who wrote this article, because I believe that they did it in good faith. But the fact of the matter is that all this article displayed to me is that this person does not have a nuanced understanding of the medium and the content that they're speaking about. Because you can't be a fan of comics and say that comic books objectively support police. Most of the time, that's not what I see. Daredevil fights cops. Batman fights cops. Spider-Man has fought cops. We've seen the X-Men constantly mistreated by the government and by police. It just so happens that the police cannot harm the X-Men for the most part.
Yeah.
The Civil War comic book dealt with this very topic expertly. There are so many examples of the opposite that this article does not point out.
Right. And I think that is where my initial criticism came from, right? Where it's like I'm with you, where like I feel like this as a talking point it's worthy of discussion. Like I think it's worth examining how we portray police officers and everything like that, right? Like I think that that's a valid point to bring up in 2020, right? Like let's re-examine this. Fine. I think where you lose me is when you cherry pick and misrepresent some of the cherry picked examples that you make without acknowledging, you know, how many books or different depictions of characters have, you know, looked at things in the opposite way. And I think that's something I get frustrated by when anyone who's outside of comics makes commentary on superheroes, because you're coming with like an inherently, I don't want to say bias, but like you're coming with a viewpoint that is not representative of the whole of what has been said and how characters have been used and whatnot, right? Because like Phil always brings up, and he brought up earlier in this conversation, the earliest Superman stories have him fighting corrupt cops. So like that's a huge thing that was a core central part of the ideation behind the character. And that's the same character who early we talked about, his slogan is truth, justice, and the American way, right? And that was a book where he fought corrupt cops and bankers and, you know, like fucking people who beat their wives and all. Like like they were in that same category, right? Of bad guys, was bad cops. And that you can't divorce one from the other. You can't say Batman's friends with Jim Gordon, so he likes the police, while there are dozens of stories about Batman fighting corrupt cops. And I think to say that they're an extension of a corrupt justice system also, to me, ignores, I think, the point of a lot of superhero books, right? Because why is Batman Batman? Because he was a victim of a crime. His parents died, and there wasn't a police officer there to help him, and his parents' killer was never brought to justice, right? The dude's still out on the street when he's a grown man. Like, that is why Batman exists, is because the system is corrupt. And the Gotham PD particularly is, there's a straight fucking line from you're on the street, you get arrested, you go to jail, you're back on the street doing the same shit again. Like, that's the world he lives in. And there are plenty of commentary that's against the police. And I think you can look at examples of any of these characters where there's bad examples of stuff that is propaganda and it is overtly pro-police in a way that maybe it shouldn't be, when there's just as many that are taking them to task and trying to be critical. So I think, to Sean's point earlier, I think in the real world, I get why we feel like right now is not the time for qualifiers, right? It's not the time for those things. I think when you're talking about art, like, there's absolutely room, so much room for compromise and nuance, because we are supposed to be presenting an ideal world, right? Like superhero stories are not realistic. And I think, like, presenting a scenario where there is a character who has a relationship with a good police officer is not a ringing endorsement across the board of, oh, superheroes are cops and they all love cops and they all work with the police. Like, it's just not how it works.
I think to one of your last points on them being an extension of the system, I think that also inherently means that because they are that extension, that something is failing and they have to fill that void. And if they fill that void, they have to some extent, automatically be against, not necessarily against, but be something that has to attempt to fix that system. And be able to have like a back and forth, like a dialogue with it, because you have to operate under a different set of rules, and you have to operate under different like presumptions therein, and that in and of itself is something that it's not anti-cop, but it does put into question where they lie, and typically that's not on the side of, like, quote unquote, like, the law. But the means and the end goals are all they're as best as they can be altruistic and ultimately try to do the right thing. With that, I have to bounce, guys. This was fun. Damn.
Great discussion.
But yeah, I'll catch you guys later.
See you
Thanks,
next week, bud.
Mark.
Take care, Marco. Happy 4th.
Mr. Marco Animoto
On Instagram and Twitter.
Damn, and like that, he's gone.
That's right. If you say his Twitter and Instagram handle, he poops out of thin air.
I gotta fix Sean's face real quick here.
Okay.
You go ahead. I'll work on it.
Okay. Something that really stood out to me is something you said, Sean, which is, a black person dies in a very, it's, very center stage. Everyone in the country sees, hears it. It's a cry for justice, right? And all of a sudden, every white person in the country is that was a fun cry for justice pun. Is clamoring for reform and stuff. And part of me, of course, is glad. I mean, all of me is glad that now everyone is paying attention and wants positive change. But the issue is when it's like token change, like people are asking for things that don't actually, are something that isn't really consequential, I guess. So, you'll see things in New York where they'll paint a mural or something instead of actually doing something about, like, the budget of the police in the city. You'll see things like this constantly. So, a part of me does think it's important to push back on propaganda in media, because it is, don't get me wrong, or it's important to approach this with nuance and something that's thoughtful. But ultimately, the other part of me kind of rubber bands back, thinking like, this isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is actually having sweeping legislative change around the country and cities around the country on actual police reform, and approaching what defunding the police actually means, which, despite protests around the country, most cities aren't even taking seriously still.
Yeah, absolutely. And this feels like that. This feels like, okay, cops are bad. Well, how are cops shown in comics? Because we got to make sure that people are not seeing cops portrayed in a good light, because that might make more cops, or it might make it too hard to realize that cops are bad. And that's bogus, man. Yeah. I grew up knowing that cops are bad. So when I see cops portrayed in comics, I'm not thinking, oh man, I can't believe that, they're showing me good police. This is BS. I've had family members who I've had bad run-ins with cops. I don't want to see this crap. No, I have the ability to say those cops were bad. Jim Gordon is good.
Sure.
Batman has a relationship with Jim. He has a bad relationship with other police. It's
Batman
nuance.
Has pointed out many times that Gordon is like the good cop that he knows.
Yeah.
Furthermore, it's important to note that it's very important to defund the police, but the stuff that Jim Gordon and Batman are specifically dealing with are things that probably merit the attention of a police force, because it's serious, like serial killing type crime.
Like crazy gang related activity where they're like fucking blowing up hospitals and shit, like it's domestic terrorism sometimes.
Right. There is, and that's, again, like the lack of nuance. Are you really going to sit here and tell me that there's no scenario in which you would like there to be a law enforcement officer present? That's crazy if your answer is yes.
Yeah.
It's just nuts. So I don't believe that comics or superhero movies have a problem with the way that they depict cops. I think starting from that angle is weird. And I also don't believe, full stop, that comic book characters are a direct extension of police.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
That's wild. Comic book characters, for the most part, are vigilantes, which is illegal.
Yeah.
And very often, probably more often than not, the ones who operate closest to the streets are actually chased by cops and don't have. Yeah, they don't have good relationships with cops. And if you want to be educated about that, there are so many Daredevil comics you can go ahead and read. So many Batman comics you can go read.
Heroes for Hire.
Yeah.
Or like
Luke Cage.
I think it's funny, like the Punisher example too, right? Where it's like, well, think of how many panels are of Punisher like throwing a cop off a roof or dangling him by his ankles or some shit.
Right.
Like
the issue with him is perception and how people relate to him. And we talked about that. So.
Yeah.
But he's anti that as well. He's anti bad cop.
Right.
And there are no comic book characters that I have ever seen who are pro bad cop, right? This argument almost sounds like, because again, if you're saying all cops are bad and there are no good cops at all, then that would make a person think that Spider-Man is pro bad cop. But every depiction you see of him having a good interaction with a cop, that cop is depicted as a good person. That cop, that one cop.
Right.
Sean, actually, Lex Luthor, the greatest hero in all of the world, he has some police under his budget, and maybe some of what they do is questionable, but it's for a greater good.
So, Sean, I did want to pose a question to you.
That
I thought it was interesting. So, you made the point earlier, right, where you as a Black American don't feel like you need comics or any media to tell you that cops are bad, right? you also made the same point where I feel like a lot of white Americans are having that moment now, you know, of really like coming to grips with how bad things are, right? That it's not a few bad apples, that it's a systemic problem with the police. What do you think about I guess the whole propaganda point through that context, right? Of like, do you think that there is value in re-examining the ways that we kind of seemingly exclusively, in a lot of media anyway, comics aside, right? Like portray cops as heroes rather than a more nuanced approach of that there are cops that are good people, but the system is bad, right? Or what have you. Like, I guess, do you think for people who are already like in that mindset and have that kind of baked into so much media that it's been reinforced, and you know, you grow up going to school thinking if you're in trouble, find a police officer, like those kinds of things. Like, that's what I'm saying though. Like, I think to white Americans, that's their experience. Do you think that media is important for people who have that mindset, or for media to like grapple with that because of people who have that mindset?
That's a really good question, and I have an answer. So I guess that these people have been living under a rock.
Yes.
Because there's so much media that already does that already presents cops in a more nuanced light. And it goes as far back as the 90s. You watch shows like, for example, The Wire. The Wire, one of the greatest TV shows of all time, has a stable of cops who are the main characters and criminals who are also the main characters. And the point of the show, one of the points of the show, is to show you that neither one of those groups is as black and white as you would think they are. Sure. The cops suck often, whether as people or at their jobs, and the criminals have values and morals and things that they stand for, and families, and things that if you don't have the ability to think critically about things, you would be surprised by. So that's one example. The Sopranos has almost exclusively corrupt cops. All the cops on that show just want to be friends with Tony or have some bad thing going on with them or whatever. New York Undercover deals with, I could go on and on. New York Undercover has 2 minority cops. One is black, one is Spanish, and they deal with corruption inside the police force in very many episodes of the show. There are so many. The Shield is another example. The Shield is only about corrupt cops. That's what that show is about, right? We've had corrupt cop media since the 90s, and I don't get where this mentality is coming from, that the media is overrun with propaganda. I'm not telling you that those are the only things that exist. There are so many. Now, granted, we also have had shows like Cops.
Cops, which is real fucking police officers, which is crazy.
Which is real police officers arresting real people, right? Live PD, the show.
Live PD is a great example.
Right. Those shows should not exist.
Hardcore propaganda.
Right. But I actually don't think the reason that they shouldn't exist is because of the propaganda. I think the reason they shouldn't exist is because it trivializes things that are way, way more important than your entertainment at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Those things are very serious, and they shouldn't be shown as entertainment, because that is where you get people having skewed understandings of what we're dealing with, because it's actually real. Yeah. Right? Jim Gordon is not a real human. Neither is Batman. But when you watch Cops, those are real cops.
Right. Yes. 1,000%. Another issue is, there are people who are good people that go into the police, but yes, the thing that's problematic is not those individuals who are good people. It's the lack of accountability, right? And this is the stuff that you don't see in media as often, and maybe you will in a show like The Wire, because The Wire is like a really smart show. Problem is, you say people are living under a rock. I think a lot of people are living under a rock and don't watch things like that because they're not interested in things like that. They'd rather turn into a live PD. So, you know, you got a guy who kills an innocent black person, and as evidence leading into the George Floyd case, officers aren't convicted for things like that. There is no accountability because oftentimes the city DA is also in bed with the police. One hand washes the other, and there's absolutely no accountability. So this, I'm not trying to circle back here, but it's just the thing is, we need real life institutional change. Then maybe something like portraying a police officer in positive light won't be as questionable or problematic, because we've actually taken the time as a society to root out the things that are rotting city police around the country.
Sure. But again, that is a real thing that really has to happen.
Yes.
Right? And if you want to know about that, you should read a book, you should read an article. There's lots of smart people out there who have talked about this, and they've been talking about it for a very, very long time. You should not be looking to your television to learn about that. You shouldn't.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
Spider-Man told me cops are bad, so cops are bad.
Well, TV told me cops are bad too, to be honest with you. But
that's the thing, though, right? Is like I definitely agree with you, right? I'm asking that question, like, I think for people that aren't on the same page as us, right? Because there are so many people that are not going to go read a book and are not going to do that legwork, and like their worldview is so decided by the media that they consume, you know, which is like why. I guess I think it's an interesting talking point, even though I agree with you that it's certainly not a solution, right? Like,
but
no, go ahead, Sean.
So if that's the case, which I agree that is the case, that there are, and Phil said it too, that there's people who would rather watch Live PD than watch
Fox
The
News.
Wire. Right. Well, their worldview is decided.
Yep.
And I am very tired of this idea that we have to change and sanitize and alter everything for people who don't get it, right? If you don't get it, that's fine, okay? Just because people have misinterpreted, say, the Bible since it was written doesn't mean that the Bible has to be thrown out. It means that those people do not get it. That's it. That's all it means. People not getting that, like I have watched so many episodes of Cops and Live PD, like so many, right? Those shows are trash. They shouldn't exist. I watched it. I don't have a problem understanding that what I'm watching in the moment is not good, right?
Sure.
Other people can't do that. That's their own problem, right? And I go back to what I said earlier, that now that we've had this great awakening, it's, again, white people figure something out. It's time to change everything. It's time to change the world. Well, how about you? How about you change your community? Change the thought process of the people around you. Stop relying on the media and the government to fix a problem that you can fix. You can fix it.
If you fix real world problems and elect people who will actually call for significant reform in many of societal's ills, you'll see that reflect in media as well.
Yeah.
And I understand that as a whole, there's a lot of really fucked up things happening. Hell, you know, we see the Avengers, which are like a paramilitary organization funded by the government in the movies and in some comics. You know, if we put less, we are seeing more and more pushback on how fucked up paramilitary actions are in our country. Put more and more pressure on the real world flaws in these things, and you'll see it reflect better in the media.
That was another thing that was extremely frustrating about this article. It makes the point that the Avengers are funded by S.H.I.E.L.D. First of all, most of the time, that's not true.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they're funded by Iron Man,
right,
or some, you know, mystery person or whoever. Most of the time, they're not funded by S.H.I.E.L.D. And in the very same movie that this person called out for turning into a quip fest.
Mm-hmm.
They specifically argue over the fact that they know that if they work for Thunderbolt Ross, right, he's going to eventually make them go and be Avengers in places that don't want the Avengers.
Right.
And that he will be deciding who needs
avenging.
Who needs avenging.
Right.
And that's wrong. The movie makes that point. So why would that be an example of a movie? Because the movie makes jokes? That's what those movies do. And you shouldn't be looking to those movies for what your morality is. But
Sure,
if you
right.
do, the movie tells you what the answer is.
Also, not to mention, I think probably the most significant example of the Avengers being a paramilitary organization is in the Ultimate Comics, which obviously the films take a lot of inspiration from. And guess what? The Ultimate Comics overtly say that that's a bad thing. Captain America is like a crazy Republican war vet who becomes president, and it's horrible. Like, it doesn't, like, it's all bad, right? Like, most of those characters are portrayed as bad people or like black ops military fucking murderers who they put a fucking suit on. So, like, again, like, are you really, like, it sounds to me like you're reading past the themes to make a point. And they're not things that I don't understand how you could pull out of the work, but it very much feels to me like when I read a review from someone who feels like they have an agenda or they feels like they have an axe to grind. And I don't mean that in like a, oh, you have a political agenda way or whatever, but like you're setting out to make this point about superheroes. So you are finding examples that fit your narrative versus like really, really examining them for what they are and what they're saying. And I think that to me is, like, I don't mean to be disrespectful to the author, but I think that it's lazy, you know, and whether it was done in good faith or not, there's a lot that you can critique about the positions taken in that article.
Not to mention that most comic book creators are notoriously liberal, right? Like,
for the most part, right?
Yeah. I mean, come on. But there was one last thing from the article that I wanted to bring up before we close this out, and it relates to Watchmen. The writer, both actually. Okay. The writer says, but the superhero property that most directly engages with corruption and policing is Watchmen. In Alan Moore's 1986 graphic novel, vigilantes who believe they have the right to fight and live by their own moral codes often prove themselves despicable bigots or megalomaniacs. One particular image of so-called heroes confronting a riot looks an awful lot like the recent videos we've seen of police officers shooting rubber bullets and tear gas at protesters. Still, the comic was a product of its time, and its storylines have not all aged well. The article goes on to talk about the HBO's Watchmen. All it says is that HBO's Watchmen is a good example of, you know, taking a story that didn't do a good job of showing a nuanced perspective and doing a better job somewhere else because it tackles racism and stuff like that.
That is a fucking idiotic point. And every other example, I think there was like woeful ignorance in some of those, or willful ignorance in some of those, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But that is such a overt not understanding what Watchmen is about, or like proving to me that you haven't read it, if that's your takeaway. Because the entire point of Watchmen is that all of these people who are called heroes are fucking bigots and megalomaniacs and shitty people. That's the fucking point of the book. And it exists as a critique of those things, not to glorify them. And to say that it has aged poorly, like, shows that you don't understand what it's trying to say, or that you didn't try.
It's very antithetical to Alan Moore's entire philosophy.
Yeah. Like, if you know anything about Alan Moore, like, that's so, like, he's so obviously showing you, hey, this is a thing that you regularly glorify in this medium, and it's not good. That's the fucking point. It's a deconstruction.
She actually says Moore's story ultimately becomes a tale of white men fighting over power.
That's so fucking not. That's so missing the point.
This is the problem in these conversations. You can't have You can't have read Watchmen and honestly say that that's what Watchmen was about. Mm-mm. It's not.
No, it isn't. Like, that to me feels like a very similar boiling down of like when there was like the Democratic race, right? And it's like, oh, we're down to just 2 white guys. And it's like, yeah, but one of them is trying to give you free healthcare and the other one established the racist police system that we have, right? Like, it's like, sure, you can boil down that the Watchmen is about powerful white men arguing over power, sure. If that's all you take away from it, that's like a super fucking shallow reading of the work. What'd you say, Phil?
No, I was going with you. You're good.
Yeah.
Phil, speak on this though.
I think sometimes there are people who parrot talking points without really focusing on the actual important details. For instance, I think most people acknowledge that it's important that we scrutinize a white patriarchy that exists in the world, because that's true and that is a problem, right? And I think a lot of people, specifically people who are liberal, can identify this and recognize this because it's very easy to see. It's not complicated. Most of the government is run by white males. Most corporations are run by white males. Most of the world is fucked up. They can draw a line very simply, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem is when you don't actually give it more scrutiny than that. So when something, say, is scrutinizing that, and you can't recognize that it's scrutinizing that. To Pete's point, when you have a political candidate who is an old white male who's running on a platform that is meant to disenfranchise minorities and women and provide benefits to people who can't access them. The real crux of the issue here, and this speaks to the Black Lives Matter movement right now that white people are trying to co-opt, is that it's ignoring the very fundamental issue of class. Class is such an intrinsical part of everything that's happening. And it's why people really struggle to say, okay, a good example is we had a black president for 8 years. And for a lot of people, they cheerleaded that because they couldn't scrutinize it beyond the fact that, oh, we have a black person as president, without actually acknowledging the problematic things that black president did. Because, again, it comes back to class. That black president was, at this point, is a billionaire who will vie for the interest of other billionaires. Most black people in America are very poor because of just a racist class structure that's been implemented since the foundation of the country. So when you don't actually acknowledge the class barriers that exist, you're ignoring a fundamental issue that exists. And so when you have someone that's penning this article and doesn't actually pay attention to things beyond just black and white and male and female, which again are problems, without acknowledging the other fundamental elephant in the room, you have something that is extremely inherently tone deaf.
Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. And it ignores what I think is often discounted as well, which is the human ability to be whatever you're going to be outside of your race. And so often, even on the left, right, which is supposed to be super open and liberal, people get put in boxes. Barack Obama isn't a good person because he's black, right? He wasn't the best candidate because he's black. He actually has, done things that aren't great. And we can talk about that, right? It's not racist to acknowledge the things that he's done poorly. It's also not, it's not white men in power fighting over power when you have the ultimate conclusion of a story that is so much more nuanced than that come down to white guys. Yes, they're white. What else did you notice? That's not the only point. That's not even the most relevant point. If Rorschach was black, is he a different character? No, because the things that Rorschach does, the things that he believes, the things that he's experienced can happen to anybody, not just a white guy.
I think there's go ahead.
Hold on. Does what Rorschach do? So Rorschach has very fundamentally problematic libertarian values in that story.
Yeah.
He submits his journal to a far right-wing ideological magazine publication. However, if Rorschach's black in that story, does that make him a hero because of his skin color?
Right.
No, he's still an extremely problematic character.
Right.
And that's nuance. Alan Moore is not saying he's a hero or a villain necessarily. He's introducing a complicated character. And based on how culture reacted, he's divisive.
Also, like, I think it gets really frustrating to me when people criticize media because so the earlier part of this conversation about propaganda and the depiction of police in the media, right? We're criticizing works for not being representative enough of the real world. In the real world, cops are, the system is corrupt, and there are a lot of bad police officers, and there's a lot of nuance in the discussion around good cops versus bad cops and what that means, and great. And we're complaining that media is not taking it to task. But then in the same breath, we'll complain about media that is dealing in spaces or conversations that are overwhelmingly dominated by white men, and then being like, well, this story is all about white men. It's like, well, yeah, I thought we all agreed that corrupt white men rule the world. So why wouldn't a story about corrupt people who rule the world be about white men? Like, that's the same fucking conversation, right? Like, do you want the media to be representative of the world or not? And, like, I feel like there are a lot of conversations that come up around that, like when there's like certain depictions of like violence against women, right? Where it's like there are some depictions of violence against women that is overtly, from a male perspective, and it's very like masturbatory, and it's like it is like cheap, right? But then there's other depictions of violence against women where like something like the girl with the dragon tattoo, right? Where like it's trying to say something about violence against women. And I think, like, there are a lot of people who are quick to just be like, well, you shouldn't depict that. That's bad or that's wrong. And it's like, well, like, no, like, how's it, like, what is the point of it? What is it trying to say, right? And, like, in Watchmen, it's trying to say that a bunch of these crazy, some ways powerful, in some ways not,
but influential.
These influential white men fucked up the world and are still fucking up the world. That's a huge part of what that book's about. And, like, that's commentary about the world as it was in that at that time, and still is in so many ways 40, 30 years later.
To say that Watchmen hasn't aged well is just odd. I mean, you got to be kidding me.
You haven't read it.
The last. Go ahead.
That was the whole point of the show being made, is that it's as relevant now as it's ever been.
The last point, thank you, that I wanted to make is simply this. The writer and many others, to be fair, have criticized the original Watchmen in light of the new Watchmen for not including a diverse cast and for not dealing with issues of race, and that the new Watchmen is superior because it presents race as an element of the story. In fact, the central problem in the story is one of racism, systemic racism in the country. But here's the thing, and I'm saying this again from the perspective of someone who A, is black, and B, loves the Watchmen show, the HBO's Watchmen. Alan Moore's Watchmen is not problematic, and it's not bad for not talking about race, for the simple fact that that's not what Alan Moore was talking about. He was talking about something else. So why should Alan Moore have to talk about race in a book where that's not the subject? Does he have to talk about every single thing that's ever happened that's bad? Does he have to talk about everything that's currently bad? Should he have included something about Hitler? Should he have included something about sexism? How many things does Watchmen have to be about to satisfy every single person on Earth, right? It's a story about something specific that cannot include everything. And that's why we have more than one story. Watchmen is not the only comic. Watchmen is not the only story that's ever existed. If you want something about race, there's other places for that. That's not what he was talking about.
Like the show. Great job. Did
Sure.
a great job with it. Plus, there's also the angle of that.
That's what people are saying, though, Pete. That they're saying, "Oh, I'd rather watch the show because it has that."
Yeah, but like they're different. That's like Sean's whole point. It's like they're different and they're both good because they address different things. Also, I think there's something to be brought up here where like it's another conversation where people want to have their cake and eat it too, right? Where we'll say like Alan Moore's a white British dude. What the fuck is he the person to write about the black experience in America? Or like the problem of systemic race in America, a country that he didn't move to until he was in his like 20s or 30s. Like,
I don't think he ever moved here, did he?
I thought he lived here during. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant.
I think he still lived in England that whole time.
So even there, then, right? Why is that his story to tell? Spoiler: it's not. And if he had, now we'd be looking at it and being like, "Oh, who the fuck was he to say that?" Or, "Oh, here's how he got that wrong," because that's not his experience and that's not his story. Okay, great. So, what are we doing?
What does Kale always make fun of Mark Waid for? He always says, "Oh, Mark Waid, the guy who writes teenagers, like he gets that." You know?
Yeah.
You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. And I think that it's really high time that we stop painting with a wide brush and start with nuance. That's the key issue. You know, the problem is that people have said all cops are good, right? But then the opposite of that is also bad. The problem is that we never want to have the middle ground conversation that's the hardest thing to do. The hardest thing to do is to have a nuanced conversation because it requires that you actually know what you're talking about. So this has been a conversation where we say to the writer of this article, that with all due respect, this is inaccurate. Ileana Doctorman, you did a good job. The article's well written, and I think you wrote it in good faith, but there's just no nuance present in this article, and we need nuance. We need that badly to progress as a society, because without it, we will always have all cops are bad, all black people are bad, all Spanish people are thieves that run around with knives, because we accept the narrative that's being fed to us without questioning it or trying to create our own idea of what's true and what's not. So I ask that if you're going to critique anything, you do so from an informed perspective that doesn't simply try to fit the narrative that you already have, because that's what's failing in this country. So that's going to do it for our conversation. We did it.
We solved racism.
We solved racism, everybody.
Leave it to us.
Didn't even take 200 episodes. I'm really proud.
Yeah. Yeah. What's next?
Sexism. Let's do it.
Sexism. That's the next one.
Dudes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's episode 294. Or 194. I'm sorry.
We're coming for you, patriarchy. You're next.
Yeah. So thank you for being a part of that conversation. Let us know your thoughts about this Time Magazine article. We will link to it. If you do read it and you happen to disagree with the writer, I do want to say, and not to say that I think our listeners are like that, but please don't go and harass this person or, spew venom at this person. I think it's good to have a discourse. I think the conversation is totally fine. And I think as long as you're within bounds, it's perfectly okay to, express your disagreement. But
they started a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't make it personal.
Right. Like, express your disagreement in a way that's respectful and that's polite, Like, that's it's totally fine to disagree on this issue. We disagreed with her article, and we attacked some of her logic, but I don't think it was at all in a way that was like pointed or disrespectful. And like that to me is like that's what this show's all about. It's about having the conversation. Like her opinion, whether or not you agree with it, like it's worth listening to.
It deserves as much space as
this conversation.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And we're here to point out the flaws in that opinion. But nevertheless,
own it.
If you want to have a conversation with us about this or anything else we talked about on the show, you can get us at thecomicspals@gmail.com. We're on the socials at thecomicspals. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can leave us a like, drop the comment, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. All of those things are free to do, and they help us out a lot more than they cost you. So do that. And while you're at it, come join our Discord, where we are always having really good, nuanced conversations about all sorts of things. And it's a lot of fun. We got our Killer Be Killed book club out now. Go check that out. It was a lot of fun. Very good stuff. And we'll be hitting you with another one of those at the end of July.
And don't forget, if you haven't gotten Killer Be Killed, that image bundle, $18, get that in like fucking, like literally, like it's like $2,000 worth of comics or something. Go hook yourself up. That's a great deal.
Yep. Let's do the plugs, Pete.
Thank you guys for joining us here in another episode of the Comics Pals. I'm @loud_Pete on Twitter and Instagram. Come chat with me about what you are reading, writing, playing, listening to, making. What are you up to these days? How are you staying sane in this quarantine world? I wanna hear about it. Come chat with me. So if you want to get some more content from me, you can head over to lootpots.com, where I host their weekly Nintendo podcast, the Potscast, as well as the Patreon exclusive show After Dark, which you can get for $1. So if you want some more podcasts from me, that's a great place to do it.
All right, Phil.
Check out Marco. We mentioned it before, Mr. Marco Animoto on Twitter and Instagram. Kale, it's his birthday today, 2 days before this episode drops.
Wish him a
so go wish him a happy birthday in the Discord.
Yeah.
And you can find him at Toto and Toe, and you can find his comics and Comixology for free. So go check those out. Panels Publishing, or Panels Comics rather. And then for me, Cyborg Bebop, Twitter and Instagram. I started watching My Hero Academia. You can talk to me about that if you want.
Bro, we got to get Sean in on this.
Nope. I am on Twitter and Instagram only at Sean Soapbox. Hit me up to talk about this article if you have thoughts, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since I read it. And I really, really would love for us to be able to move forward as a people, being able to have a civil, more nuanced discourse about everything. And my Twitter is a great place to do that. So come chat. With that, we're the Comics Pals signing off. Take care, guys.
See you next week.
So he's got a movie called Vendetta that Dean Cain stars in with The Big Show.
Wait, what?